Good afternoon. Welcome to 2024 Seoul Economic Daily Aerospace Forum. Why don't you give ourselves a round of applause before we begin? I am the MC of today's forum. My name is Gwan, and I'm very pleased to meet you and honored to lead you through today's conference. For today's forum, yesterday, as you know, the CASA was open. So with this great milestone, we would like to have a discussion on the current landscape of the Korea's aerospace industry in order to navigate future directions. So we have a chief technologist from NASA, and also soon the head of mission, John Lee of CASA, will join us as well. We also have the president of Korea, CASA, and so on. So many experts, renowned experts from the relevant organizations and agencies. They're all joining us, so we will have a great discussion starting from now to 4 o'clock. So I hope that all the audiences will also actively take part by asking questions and also making comments. Now we would like to invite the Son Dong-young, CEO of Seoul Economic Daily, for his opening remarks.
안녕하십니까?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Son Dong-young, CEO of the Seoul Economic Daily.
서울 포럼 2024.
Now, the Seoul Forum 2024. Now, this is a special event at the Seoul Economic Daily Aerospace Forum 2024. I would like to welcome you all and thank you very much for your participation. Now, first of all, I would like to thank Mr. Im Jong-in, Special Cyber Secretary of the Presidential Office. Thank you very much for being here today. And also, now, with the CASA opening yesterday, I'm sure that he has had a very busy day, but Mr. John Lee, he's also here today. Thank you very much. The head of missions at the Korea AeroSpace Administration. Now, as you can imagine, it is highly meaningful that we are having this forum right after the day of the CASA opening. And let me also thank Son Song-rak, Vice Chief of Staff of ROCOF, and also Shin Sung-chul, Ambassador for Science and Technology Cooperation. And also, I would like to thank everyone who are participating in the discussion. Let me also especially thank Mr. A.C. Charania, Chief Technologist at NASA, for being here today. Now, we see that the competition in aerospace is becoming fiercer. It used to be that only a handful of powerful countries who would compete in aerospace, but then now, today, there are dozens of countries participating. And at the same time, we are moving now into the new space era with the private sector taking an active part. So we can see that the aerospace is becoming a bigger and bigger space for development. So then they say that the market is also set to grow into over 500 trillion as of 2030. Now, Korea, although we started late, but we became the 7th country to shoot the satellite into the orbit with NARO. And the Korean government is also working hard for the Korean aerospace development, also to open up the new space. So then, that is how the CASA was opened. The opening of CASA is going to be an important turning point for the Korean aerospace history. Of course, the aerospace industry is also going to be an important economic industry, but it is also going to be very important for the nation's defense. And of course, the competition among the countries is also going to become fiercer over the space resources, and that is why the competition is only set to intensify. Now, in 2019, the Seoul Economic Daily has been hosting the Aerospace Forum every year since 2019 on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the human landing on the moon. And the forum will continue to serve as the guiding post for the aerospace development trends and direction. And I do hope that the forum will be useful in analyzing the trends inside and outside of Korea in aerospace development. So once again, I would like to thank everyone for your participation here today. Thank you.
서경 우주 포럼을 주최하신 손동영 사장님께
Thank you very much. That was the opening speech by Son Dong-young of Seoul Economic Daily.
나사 청장님이 And also the Bill Nelson, the administrator of NASA, sent us the video to congratulate the opening of the CASA. So we will watch that video first. And then we are going to have the presentation by AC Charania from NASA.
To the people of the Republic of Korea. When a nation as innovative, as visionary, as imaginative as the Republic of Korea establishes a space agency, the Korea AeroSpace Administration, that's a giant leap for all humanity. Because when great nations work together, we extend our reach into the stars. You share our quest for the cosmos. For years, including under the leadership of President Biden and President Yeong, America and South Korea have joined together on a wide range of cosmic endeavors. New frontiers in planetary science, new advances in aeronautics such as air traffic safety, new findings as we study our fragile Earth and work together to protect it. Just think what we did together in 2022 when NASA launched our ShadowCam instrument on Korea's Pathfinder lunar orbiter. That shared venture is delivering image after image of the lunar South Pole in stunning detail, and it's happening as we speak. Our partnership allows us to see new things. It allows us to achieve the impossible. And through the Artemis Accords, our nations and our space agencies will continue working together to ensure the future of space belongs to nations who work openly, responsibly, peacefully for the benefit of all. I'm pleased to welcome CASA to the newest ranks of star sailors, and together we're going to sail on a cosmic sea.
여러분.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, so yes, the day is upon us. So we have always been saying that we need to have an aerospace control tower for so long, and now, finally, we do have CASA opening. So now then, agencies like NASA, and so perhaps a bit ahead of us in exploring space, so we would also be able to strengthen our international cooperation with such agencies so that Korea should also become an important player in aerospace. So now then, on that note, I would like to invite Mr. AC Charania, Chief Technologist of NASA. Now, Mr. Charania, of course, there are 6 mission directorates under NASA, and he is coordinating R&D and together with the agencies inside the US and also agencies of other countries as well as other companies of other countries. Now he is coordinating the research efforts with them. So please welcome him with a big round of applause. So he will tell us about the aerospace strategy and future direction of NASA.
안녕하세요. ACIO. Congratulations to the Republic of Korea, as our administrator Bill Nelson mentioned, on the formation and launching of CASA. It's been 70 years of partnership with the Republic of Korea and the United States. And CASA and NASA will continue that cooperation and friendship into the future, I am sure. Having the Republic of Korea being the 10th nation that has signed the Artemis Accords, the collaboration on ShadowCam, other collaborations, the announcement of John Lee as well, who used to work at NASA, is now one of your senior leaders at CASA, all is a very good sign for the future. And I'll take a little bit of personal time to tell you about how incredible it is for me to be here. My first visit to South Korea was in 2009 for the IAC in Daejeon. In my professional career before NASA, I actually collaborated with the United States and South Korean company-to-company collaboration. I was actually at the opening ceremonies of the Pyeongchang Olympics. It was a very cold day that day, but and very fortunate now to be a senior leader at NASA, to see the formation of CASA, and very excited about its future. Today, I will talk a little bit about what we're thinking about at NASA, our office, how we're looking at the Artemis program, how we're looking at technologies, and specifically some new technologies that we all as a community are thinking about relative to quantum and AI. So a little bit about me, came from commercial industry for more than 25 years to the space agency at NASA, and I think it shows the public-private partnerships that we have established between our industry and NASA, and how I can continue that journey here at NASA headquarters. I am in the Office of Technology, Policy, and Strategy at NASA headquarters. We support Administrator Bill Nelson, Deputy Administrator Pam Melroy, and Associate Administrator Jim Free at NASA headquarters in thinking about policy, economics, technology, and strategy. We do analyses for our senior leadership, and we publish our annual report if you want to know more about what our office does relative to the agency. Now, this was a question actually at lunch we were talking about as we talk about why do we explore with humans and robots, how do we answer that question? So very fortunately, at NASA a few years ago, encouraged by our Deputy Administrator Pam Melroy, we tried to answer that question. And so we actually have a large document we publish online that explains the 3 whys of why we do exploration. It's science, national posture, and inspiration. And so I think, and we've decomposed these 3 whys into even a larger subset to explain to our stakeholders, Congress, the young people of the United States, academia, industry, the reasons why we're doing these campaigns, these missions of going back to the moon and onwards to Mars. We have a very exciting program at NASA. As we like to say, it is no longer PowerPoint slides. It is actual hardware. We are building hardware. We're doing test flights. We have chosen astronauts. We're building systems in collaboration with industry under the Artemis program. So we successfully flew Artemis 1 to demonstrate some of the technologies on launch in our Orion capsule. We've selected the first crew that will return to the moon and going around the moon in Artemis 2, including the first Canadian astronaut. And we're now planning for Artemis 3 and Artemis 4. Artemis 3 being the first human landing in more than 50 years with the first woman and person of color. So we've let out contracts, we're building spacesuits, our companies are developing lunar landers, and we're doing additional test flights of SLS and Orion. We're including in this plan the development of a lunar space station we call the Gateway. So we've started development of hardware and the first initial elements of the Gateway that we will launch to support our future Artemis missions. We call these first set of missions human lunar return, the return to the moon, cislunar space, and the lunar surface. As we go beyond human lunar return, we have additional missions to enhance capabilities. And this is where our early stage technologies are going to have an effect. And that includes a lunar terrain vehicle that will help our astronauts traverse the lunar surface, expand the Gateway, look at habitats on the surface, and then building upon that with pressurized rovers and other infrastructure. Now, we've been very open about how we're thinking about this. You'll see in my presentation several QR codes. This is one about our Moon to Mars architecture, where we are giving you the information of how we're thinking about our Artemis strategy. This is very transparent, this is very refreshing, and this is for all of you internationally, our domestic US industry, academia, and others, to be with us on the journey. This is a process where we update every year our architecture definition document, or ADD, to give you an insight into our strategy for the various segments of our Artemis and Moon to Mars campaign. And here I'll talk a little bit about the segments, the various phases of how we're going back to Artemis. As I mentioned, human lunar return is one, but we build upon that to then stay longer on the lunar surface, so from 6.5 days surface stay to maybe 30 days on the surface stay, expand the gateway, and get to sustained lunar evolution. And there's a lot of words on this slide, so I'm going to use Google Translate to talk a little bit about what this all means to me in terms of the lunar moment. And this is what I mean by the lunar moment that is reflected by our sustained lunar evolution segment of our architecture.
달의 순간, 인간이 달 위를 걷는 순간, 그때부터 달에는 항상 인간이 있을 것입니다.
So that to me is the lunar moment, the technologies that are helping us get to that, which is really the sustained lunar evolution segment of our Moon to Mars architecture. All that experience to get there, to that lunar moment, we will then use on the way to Mars and as a blueprint for the rest of the solar system. Now, as we think about the technologies that help these segments, we've actually, in our ADD document, decomposed the segments that I just told you about into various sub-architectures of technologies, from transportation to habitation to mobility to robotic systems. As you look in the document, we're looking at the technologies that can impact the different segments, ranging from expanded habitation on the surface and around the moon to lunar terrain vehicles to a recent collaboration we're doing with the government of Japan with the pressurized rover. So all these collaboration areas reflected in these technology sub-architectures are places for all of us, all of you, to think about where you may want to contribute. And once again, this is a public document that you can use to think about where you might want to help in the Artemis program. And so I think I'm very happy that we'll release this document every year to provide more input. I'm very excited about the investments we are making in lunar transportation. This slide represents probably more than $7 billion plus from public accounting of public-private partnerships we are developing with our commercial United States industry. Now, these companies are developing lunar landers to transport both our payloads and your payloads in terms of the rest of the planet. These are commercially procured services we are engaged with these providers. I'm very excited about SpaceX and Blue Origin, particularly, who are developing landers for our human landing system. Both of these architectures are leveraging new technologies. I love to say that NASA is now investing in propellant depot collaborations with these companies. Both of these companies are developing crewed lunar landers that rely on propellant depot-based architectures using single-stage lunar landers, which is an incredible statement to make from maybe where NASA was thinking how it would return to the moon more than 20 years ago. And it shows you the collaborations we're doing, where these companies are developing lunar landers, SpaceX and Blue Origin, and investing as much as NASA is contracting with them. So once again, a great sign of public-private partnerships. There's a lot of technical challenges left to go, a lot of technology development, but it's very exciting times, and these are the kinds of technology investments that NASA and our industry should be working on in the 21st century. The thing I think about as chief technologist is this particular problem of technology shocks and infusion. And so at NASA, I'm trying to help the agency think about how do we innovatively bring technologies into missions. These are different examples of technologies NASA is investing in, has invested in, and is planning to invest in relative to that would help all of our human and robotic campaigns. I love to talk about our rollout solar array. This was a technology more than 15 years ago, started from a small business in America. It started with a small Air Force contract. Then NASA came in with small contracts for this company to keep them going until we then decided this was a good technology for us to use. And now this technology is being used on the International Space Station. It was used on a recent asteroid mission called DART. It's being used on our first elements of the gateway, and companies are also looking at it to use on the lunar surface. So once again, a small business technology more than 15 years ago, now we're using it all over the solar system. We're also leveraging technologies on how we use autonomy relative to observing different planetary bodies and landing more accurately. There's a system we call terrain relative navigation that leverages machine learning to help lunar landers and Mars landers land in better landing ellipses and higher landing accuracy. We're also investing in lunar surface communications. So we have a NASA tipping point contract, we call it, from our Space Technology Mission Directorate, working with Nokia to look at lunar surface LTE on a robotic mission, and then how could we leverage that for future Artemis missions. I'll end my talk with three different subjects, two being with technology. One is quantum technology. So NASA is very interested in quantum technologies. I know you have a session tomorrow on this area. We are looking at quantum technologies both in sensing, computing, and communications. These technologies have the potential to revolutionize how we observe, analyze, and communicate more securely and in more innovative ways to benefit ultimately the missions at NASA. We have many uses of quantum technologies. We've used quantum technologies from atomic clocks. At NASA Ames Research Center, we have a Quail lab that's looking at quantum algorithms, along with classical algorithms, to how to leverage the emerging fields of quantum computing from United States industry. We have a cold atom lab on the International Space Station that's looking at really cutting-edge physics in terms of physics for Einstein-Bose condensates and others. These are areas of collaboration. These are areas of technology investment. These are areas of collaboration and partnership with US industry that we are engaged with. One of the most interesting examples of the use of quantum technologies for me and at the agency is how quantum can be used in climate, and specifically quantum sensing. The quantum sensing capabilities that could be enabled by systems such as quantum gravity gradiometers have the potential to revolutionize how we understand water sources on the planet Earth, observe planetary surfaces, and et cetera. The higher precision that these sensors can provide can help us understand the water levels maybe in a certain metropolitan region where right now we can only analyze them at a state level in terms of the United States and in our geographic areas. So this is a very important area of investment for us, of technology maturation, and one of the ties of quantum sensing capabilities to the NASA mission. Something else that obviously all of us are being impacted with is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is something not new to NASA. NASA is in some sense a data agency. With all the data we're returning from all of our planetary missions and Earth observation missions, we have tremendous amounts of data. And we've been leveraging machine learning, algorithms, and AI for many, many years. From counting trees in Africa, from trained AI models, to leveraging 3D printing and AI to make novel shapes that we've never even imagined before. And we're also looking at how AI can help in how we do business on a day-to-day basis. So all these capabilities, separate from even large language models, are things that NASA has been working on. Actually, this past week, I was at a NASA town hall on artificial intelligence where we publicly announced and introduced our Chief AI Officer at NASA. Once again, we in the United States recognize AI is a powerful tool, but we should use it responsibly, ethically, but also tied to our missions. And we at NASA recognize this, and so we've chaired a new Chief AI Officer to help us think more strategically about these tools and getting them into the hands of our workforce. We've had different examples and uses of AI and machine learning, from observing the icy moons of the solar system, to looking at coral reefs on Earth, to understanding how to better and more precisely land on planetary bodies. We have identified several hundred use cases across the agency at NASA of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And we're very excited about the potential of large language models, but we must use them responsibly for both our civil servant workforce as well as working with our partner companies in the United States. But a very powerful tool. We've been using it for many years. We look forward to using even the more newer tools that will help us in coding, to analysis, to design, to helping even do back office functions, or to help in back office functions. And at the end of the day, for me, AI, large language models, are not a replacement for the human, but they enhance the human knowledge worker. And as in our town hall, an example our chief AI officer gave, or our chief CIO gave, was that in the future, it's not that AI will replace humans. It's that we need humans that know how to use these tools. Humans will still be valuable, and we still believe in that. So, and then finally, the final message I will leave with you is on space sustainability. And this is something our office was helpful with in terms of our senior leadership and other directorates and offices at NASA to think about how we deal with space sustainability. We started off by thinking about low Earth orbit. And so when we look at low Earth orbit, there is a issue with a lot of spacecraft in low Earth orbit, but even more importantly, a lot of debris. From 0.1 to 1 centimeter size debris that are tens of millions of objects up there. And so we recognize this issue. And for the last few months, we have been putting together a space sustainability strategy to look at how NASA can more optimally, in a more smarter fashion, address this issue of orbital debris in Earth orbit. So we recently have published a few months ago a space sustainability strategy that has many pillars of how we look at a framework of looking at orbital debris, the orbital debris problem, looking at how we look at uncertainties and modeling, looking at new technology development to address that issue, looking at policy issues, and looking at coordination of multilateral responses to the debris problem. This is the first volume of several volumes we're going to have on space sustainability. The first volume will be on Earth orbit. We're now moving out upon a second volume on cislunar space and other volumes as well. I think this is a very important document for us in the agency as we look forward, a very important document for our Deputy NASA Administrator, Pam Mulroy, who announced this strategy at the Space Symposium, and important enough that we are announcing a Director of Space Sustainability to help take the strategy that our office and others have developed and move it forward within the agency. So finally, I would like to say thank you for the invitation. It is an incredible time for you all in the Republic of Korea with KARI and CASA to put the framework together of working together with us in space. And I look forward to coming back to Korea, coming back to see more development, more missions, more collaborations, more industry. And once again, it's been 70 years of an incredible partnership, from signing the Artemis Accords a few years ago to the ShadowCam project, to future collaborations that I look forward to. So thank you very much and congratulations.
우리 차라니아
So thank you very much. Chief Technologist Charania, he talked about NASA's strategy for space exploration and also the future
비행기 타고 오는데
blueprint.
얼마나 걸렸어요?
How long did it take for you to come here?
Can you translate that? Flight was 15 hours from Washington, D.C., so not too bad.
이거 안 하셨네? 어쩐지 이게 좀 저도 영어를 좀 하지만 서울에서 하는 거니까 한국말로 하겠습니다.
That does not necessarily mean I don't speak English. I can speak English, but because we are in Seoul, so I'll be speaking Korean.
이따 물론
So
여기서
it took 15 hours for you to come here.
뭐 지정해서 질문도 하실 수
So,
있겠지만
and also we can have some designated question session later during the panel discussion session, but maybe we can entertain 2 or 3 questions right now.
지금 이 우리 차라니아 수석기술자님이 발제하실 때 존니 우주항공청
And in
본부장님이
fact, the
지금
John Lee, the
사천에서
head of mission, he
도착하셨거든요.
just
박수 한번
arrived. Why don't
부탁드립니다.
you give him a round of applause?
자, 그러시면은 인사하신 김에 우리 존니 본부장님이 한번 우리 차라니아
Maybe the head of
수석기술자에게
mission,
한번
John
말씀
Lee,
한번 간단하게
you
해주시죠.
can make some brief comments or questions to Charania.
마이크 예.
So what would you consider the greatest challenge for your office?
I think the greatest challenge is the problem of technology infusion that I mentioned, which is one part of our agency is maturing a technology and is a mission using it. And how I can help in getting these technologies that we're maturing into missions, maybe using innovative methods, public-private partnerships, other government agency partnerships. Within the United States, we have an agency called DARPA within the Department of Defense. DARPA is very forward-leaning and looking at advanced technologies and capabilities. They help develop the internet and many other technologies we know today. But DARPA has a problem that we have a problem in terms of technology infusion. DARPA can mature technology, but will the DoD use it? In our sense, one part of the agency is maturing a technology, but does the Artemis program use it? How can we get those technologies across what we would call the valley of death of technology infusion? And that's maybe a few places I can shine a light into these problems and to show some solutions that are more innovative. So that's, for me, my office, one of the things I think about on a daily basis. So thank you.
예, 감사합니다.
All right, thank you very much. Then,
나사
yes,
전
so
현직 그다음에 나사
the
카사 이제
current and
컨트롤
former
우리 김민하게
members of NASA and also the
협력
current
부탁드립니다.
control tower of CASA.
박수
So
한번
I
해주세요.
look forward to your cooperation. So a big hand, please.
그러면은
All right, then.
우리 자꾸 들어가려고 그러세요.
Why do you keep wanting to return to your seat?
자, 그러면 우리 카사의 중추
All right, now
역할이
then,
항우연 또 전문연이고 하니까 우리
We have
원장님
the
한번,
Korea
예,
Astronomy and Space Science Institute and also Korea AeroSpace Research Institute, Mr. Lee Sang-yu or Park Young-duk. So also if you have some questions.
Before the forum started, we had a short dialogue, and I suggested that the CASA take a look at some more the innovative, the future technology which is missing at the moment. And maybe can you answer to my suggestion? What do you think about that?
I think for us at NASA, it is looking at both mission pull and mission push technologies. So there are some investments we're making in early stage technologies at a very low level that might have future use in a mission. And then some technology investments, many times in collaboration with industry, that have direct mission infusion. So I think it's a combination. I think the other thing I think about are what are the toughest technology challenges that we have at an agency. There's actually a book I read when I joined NASA called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. I'm not advertising any particular book, but in that assessment, the first part of strategy is looking at the toughest challenges that you have. So what are the toughest mission challenges, technology challenges that we have, and maybe that guiding us in terms of our technology portfolio. Our Space Technology Mission Directorate most recently has released a set of technology shortfalls, 187 technology shortfalls, and we're now optimizing how we think about using those shortfalls and prioritizing them relative to the projects we're doing to give us a better indication of what are our toughest challenges and the best project choices for those challenges. So I think the first step is what are your toughest challenges, your shortfalls, technology shortfalls as STMD is looking at, and then what's your investment portfolio relative to those shortfalls. But then part of that should also be early stage. And we've got things like NIAC, which is a program at NASA where we fund industry, other NASA centers, and academia to look at future concepts. And so that's an example that the NASA administrator talks about many times in terms of how to think about advanced concepts that are 5 to 20 years out that you need at that early stage. So.
예, 고맙습니다. 지금 시간 관계상
So thank you very much. Due to time constraint, maybe
종합 토론 때 다시 모셔야
we
되는데
can have him again during the panel discussion session. But this is a very, very special moment, so we'll
우리 차라리
take one more
모국은
question.
인도 아니에요? 인도.
I believe that you are originally from India, right?
Pakistan.
파키스탄.
My
예.
parents were born in India, so I've relatives in both countries. Yes. Yes.
맞습니다. 인도도 그렇고 파키스탄도 그렇고 이제 우주 강국으로. 예.
I think that both of them are space powerhouse. They are truly rising, and I hope that you could also arrange further cooperation with Korea. One more question, maybe regarding the launch vehicle.
벤처 스타트 김수종 대표님.
We have a CEO of the venture
짧게
startup,
말씀주시고 이따 종합 토론 같이 해주시기 바랍니다. 예.
so please keep your comment short.
네, 지금 발사체 분야, 특히 우주 분야 전체에서도 발사체 분야에 대한
So when it comes to the launch vehicle, I believe that international collaboration is truly necessary. In Korea, we wanted to have partnership with the U.S. for years, but because of the technology restraints such as the IOTA, the collaboration wasn't really robust. So I think that these kind of regulatory restraints must be addressed in order to see full-blown cooperation. So do you think that would there be any ways for us to address this constraint? I understand the CASA is open and it could be an important opportunity, but do you still believe that the regulatory restraints can be removed in the not too distant future?
I'm a chief technologist, not an attorney, so I don't know if I'm the. I think maybe a roundabout. I'm very excited about CASA, and I think to me it goes to your question. Because having an entity like CASA helps us in conversing with Korea. So I think the conversation you can have with CASA that then they have with us is helpful in that dialogue, you know. And so I think leverage CASA, leverage John, who's sitting right there. But I think for us, it's very important now to establish a great communication link with CASA to bring about these issues. Separate from launch vehicles, I'm very excited about the Artemis Accords and how we're leveraging that for collaboration between our companies and countries. And so maybe don't have an answer on the launch vehicle side, but I think the Artemis Accords in the 30 plus countries, Korea being the 10th of those that signed, is a signal of how we want to work out there together. So for instance, in the gateway, the lunar gateway, that gateway, the initial elements are United States, but we have Japanese elements, European elements, and now a UAE element, right? I think if you told the NASA of 20 years ago, we're going to develop a lunar space station with the UAE element, 25 years ago, that you'd get some weird looks at NASA. But now there are space countries with great capabilities. And yes, there are conversations the countries have to have with each other, but I think it signals a willingness to work together. And I think cislunar space, with the gateway, with the lunar surface, with the collaborations we have with the host of countries on the moon, show how those collaborations can happen, you know, even given the existing framework. So I don't know, I'm very hopeful on cislunar space, maybe not to your direct question, but I think CASA to me is a great now conduit for us to talk to all of you in Korea. So.
고생하셨습니다. 박수 한번 해주세요.
Yes, thank you very much. A big hand, please.
그러면은 여러분들이 또
All right, now then,
보고 싶어 하시는
yes,
분인데요.
someone
우리 존 리
we have all
우주항공청
been waiting for,
임무본부장님을
and
한번
it is
힘찬
Mr.
박수로
John Lee,
모시겠습니다.
Head of
예.
Missions at Korea AeroSpace Administration. Let us welcome him with a big hand.
아시다시피 나사에서
So
아주
he actually needs no
훌륭한
introduction.
성과를
So
내셨고 또
he
모국의
has
우주항공
had stellar
발전을
career
위해서
in NASA, and then now he
이렇게
is
오셔서
back in Korea
우리
for the
우주항공의
development of
R&D
aerospace in
컨트롤
Korea.
타워죠. 그러니까
And
윤영빈
now
청장님과
in the
함께
control
같이
tower of
톱
CASA,
시스템.
so of course there is Director Yoon Hyung-bin, so then this is like the two top system.
어떻게 되는
So it's like what, Son
누가
Heung-min,
손흥민입니까?
and then so which one of you is Son Heung-min?
윤영빈 청장님하고
So
전직
then
본부장님하고
between the director
누가
and yourself, then
손흥민이 누가
which
역할이
one of you is Son Heung-min? Of course, the director, he
제가 볼 때는
is
우리 본부장님도 그렇지 않은 것
Son
같습니다.
Heung-min,
하여튼
the number one football
우리
player.
모국의
Well, I'm sure that you are at
발전을
least on
해주시고
par. So
차라리
yes, thank you very much for working for the
또
nation,
지역파
for our
하고서,
aerospace development, and of course,
부탁드리겠습니다.
Mr.
그러면
Charania,
우리 존리
as
본부장님께서
a
우리
friend of Korea, I
우주항공청
also
이
ask for your
비전과 전략에
cooperation as well.
대해서
And then now,
나사에서
let me
많은
go
경험이 있으시기
to
때문에
Mr. John Lee
편하게
to share with us
그
about
파워포인트 그 없이
the vision
편하게
and
한번
strategy
말씀해
of
주시기
CASA
바랍니다.
based on your
힘찬 박수 부탁드립니다.
experience in NASA, so without PowerPoints as well.
네, 앞에서 말씀하셔도 되고 뒤에서 말씀하셔도 되고요. 근데 가능하면 앞에서 말씀 주시는 게 오히려 있습니까? 예. 그 사실 내일 모레 대통령 참석하는
So
개청식이
tomorrow
또
we are
따로
going to
있잖아요.
have
어제
the opening ceremony
개청을
with the
했지만
presence of President.
그런데 이제 또
So it's going to be
우리나라는 또
very
그
special.
의전이라는 게 있잖아요. 그래서
And also in
대통령
Korea
앞에서
we
또
do have a
발표할 자료도 있고 한데
protocol. So
똑같이 또 발표하게 되면
and also the presentation will be made. And I think it's not really appropriate to give presentation for tomorrow today. So without presentation, we're going to have just a small speech.
존경하신 내외 귀빈 여러분,
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
2024
I would like to congratulate you on the opening of the Seoul Academic Daily Aerospace Forum. Starting from the 2010, the Seoul Forum has grown to be a world-renowned platform where the academia, business experts, and also people from all different fields come together to talk about economic issues in Korea and also present the trend for future and also navigate how to tackle the current challenges. This has truly been a recognized platform for discussion. Especially while the many people are not aware of the importance of space, the Seoul Academic Daily has conducted this Aerospace Forum back in 2019. It started as a special session in the beginning, and it has continued to this date. For this year's Seoul Academic Daily Aerospace Forum, the theme is the current landscape of the aerospace and future strategy. As you know, just by coincidence, the CASA was open yesterday. And I think that this is truly an appropriate timing that we are having this aerospace forum here today. I'm sorry for interruption.
사실 우리 본부장님이 워낙 미국에서 오래 활동하셨기 때문에 영어가 편하거든요.
I think that the head of mission could be more fluent and comfortable with English. So why don't we ask him to speak in English?
영어로 하면 편하게 말씀해 주시죠.
You can speak in English. Okay, so I will continue to speak in Korean, but then switch to English. Because I left Korea when I was 10 years old, and my Korean is not that good, so I would like to ask for your understanding. Especially when many people were not aware of the importance of the space. Back in 2019, the Seoul Academic Daily launched the Aerospace Forum as a special session, and it has continued to this date. And for this year's theme of the Seoul Academic Daily Aerospace Forum is the current landscape of aerospace and future direction. As you may be well aware, CASA was open yesterday, and I believe that it is very timely and appropriate that we are having this forum right next day, today. As you could see from the theme of this year's forum, as you know, the many countries around the world now see space as an engine for future growth, and they have come up with the blueprints and strategies for aerospace. So Korea is not an exception. While responding to these global changes and nurturing the aerospace as a new engine of economic growth, the Korean government established the CASA. So the establishment of the CASA is not just a beginning of a new government function, rather this is to find out the future engine of growth in space, and in that sense I believe that this is truly a part of the ambitious plan.
Today, as many of you may already know, I have spent the majority of my career in the aerospace R&D sector. Over the course of nearly 30 years, I have held various senior executive positions, including Director of Joint Agency Satellite Division at NASA headquarters and Acting Chief of the Information Policy and Technology Branch at the White House of the United States. In 2009, I visited Korea as a representative of the Heliophysics Division at NASA, marking the beginning of a 13 years long collaboration between NASA and the Korea Astronomy and Space Science Institute to date. I retired from NASA at the end of 2021 and have been serving as a senior advisor for CASI since January 2023. When I visited Kare, Kasi, and various universities in Korea as part of my visit in 2009, I saw great potential for growth in Korea's space industry and for advances in scientific knowledge and technological developments that drive this industry. Last year, I had the opportunity to visit institutions involved in space research and development here in Korea. There is enormous potential for synergistic collaboration among the various institutions that can be facilitated through the new Korea AeroSpace Administration, and that is why I am here today. I believe that through careful administration or examination of tried and proven systems, dedication to leveraging existing technologies in novel ways, and continued support for scientific and technological advancements, Korea can rise to become a world-class spacefaring nation. Over the years, the space industry has continued to evolve. Most recently, we have seen the rise of private sector space exploration and technological advancements. Ultimately, this era of new space has great potential to push space exploration into uncharted territory with access to resources and an agility in adapting to new developments that was unattainable by previous generations and organizations. If I were to highlight one key role of NASA among its many roles, it would be its support of private sector utilization of space technology. Similarly, CASA will facilitate the use of government-developed technologies by private enterprises for commercial applications. As a new agency, one of the top priorities for CASA is recruiting top talent to effectively carry out these plans. In the first half of this year, we have hired over 50 professionals and are in the process of hiring seasoned department leaders. We plan to complete the recruitment process by the end of the year. Our goal is to create a collaborative and collegial organizational culture that effectively leverages individual strengths to achieve agency goals. All members of CASA will be committed to efficiently leading space development, enriching the lives of Korean citizens, and creating a space agency that inspires future generations. In order to fulfill the CASA mission, I believe that CASA must take the elements that made organizations such as NASA successful, then apply these principles in a unique manner that acknowledges the unique Korean culture. We stand at the start of a new agency with a clean slate, with opportunities to tailor organizational structure to maximize impact. I believe that to do so, the Mission Directorate, which will be responsible for carrying out CASA missions, will be driven by three critical elements. First, requirements. Second, standards. And third, core values, such as excellence, teamwork, integrity, and diversity. I am committed to creating a collaborative environment where people with different backgrounds and experiences can share ideas and develop innovative solutions. For every great organization, its people are its greatest asset, and I believe this will hold true for CASA as well. As I build this team, there are three key qualities that I'm seeking from each individual. First, forward-looking team member with a collective win-win mindset. Second, big picture thinker with strong problem-solving skills. Third, self-motivated individual who anticipates future needs and clearly defines requirements to meet those goals. As we begin this new chapter of Korean aerospace with CASA, we look forward to the many meaningful discussions and meetings that will come from today's forum. We thank all the renowned experts from here and abroad for joining us today and look forward to collaborating with you to drive forward progress in the aerospace industry. Thank you.
본부장님 애쓰셨어요.
Thank you very much,
야,
Mr.
10살 때
Lee.
미국에
So
가셔가지고
yes,
아직도 한국말
so you went to the U.S. at the age of 10, but your Korean is
이렇게
still very good.
허심탄회하게,
But now,
대화를
today,
조금만 나눴으면
perhaps
좋겠는데요.
we can have a frank
마이크 하나
conversation. So
또 없습니까?
can we have a microphone here?
본부장님 너무 스피치
Yes, thank you, and also
하셨는데
thank you very
제가
much for
보니까
your speech.
너무 공식적이고
And
너무 좀 규격화되고
I can see that it
좀
was
딱딱했습니다,
quite
사실은.
formal
예,
and
그래서
also quite
편안하게,
standardized.
예,
And
조금,
so now, why don't we have a more relaxed conversation? So yes, I see that the Ambassador Shin has his hand up, so can we bring the microphone over? So I understand that we have 8 microphones available in the room.
한국에 오셨으니까 이제 한국말도 열심히
So
배우셔야
yes,
되니까
so
한국말로
since you're in Korea, so let us continue to communicate in Korean. So yes, Dr. John Lee, thank you very much for your very important decision to return to Korea to contribute to the nation. So thank you very much for that. And so as a member of the Korean citizenry, I would like to thank you very much. Now, of course, the aerospace area is one science area and industry where Korea also now has to quickly catch up. So that is why the government is so committed to it, and I am so happy that we were able to invite you. Now, of course, since you have been with NASA, then in terms of R&D, then I mean, our size is very small. So NASA is like 30 trillion. I think in Korea it's like 1 trillion. So it's only like 3%. So still we have to be competitive. Perhaps not as sizable as NASA, but still we need to do something competitive so that we can become a strong spacefaring country. And so you also talked about your vision, your philosophy, and also the mindset of the members of CASA, and then also about the scientific strategy. So if you could also share with us the scientific strategy. And then second is, now Korea is a member of the Artemis program among the 21 countries. Now then, what is the expectation of NASA of Korea in this Artemis program? So it's not for us to just go there and learn the technology, but of course Korea has to make its contribution to the world as a top 10 country. So then again, when it comes to the Artemis program, then what is going to be CASA's contribution to this? Yes, thank you. Right, so regarding the Artemis program, well, you know, I just got started yesterday, so please understand that I cannot give you the details at this time, but now the CASA, now one of the strategies of CASA Artemis will be very important. That is, I mean, everyone is aware of that. So of course, now together with the heads of different departments that we would be selecting soon, then we will continue to have our discussions. And of course, I have my connections with NASA, so I would also do my part to facilitate cooperation with NASA. Now, about the science or the science strategy, now from CASA, what we need to do is first to have the big picture and to implement it. So I'm sorry that I keep using English words, but then so it is important for us to also implement this big picture or the strategy. Now then, what is going to be the strategy of implementing this big picture? Of course, that is also going to be further discussed and detailed out with the other heads of the departments. But then, of course, yes, CASA would be the control center. But then we also need to utilize the existing infrastructure while at the same time looking to develop new things whenever necessary. So I believe that that is the kind of approach that we need to keep. All right, thank you very much.
Now,
NASA and CASA should cooperate very closely. So maybe the Mr. Charanya,
존니 본부장님한테 한번 좀 좋은 의견을 한번 개진해 주시기 바랍니다.
ask question or give him comment.
What makes you most excited about CASA's future?
So I'll answer in English for you. Okay.
좋습니다.
The reason I joined CASA is because I saw when I was traveling all across the country last year, 2023, the great potential we're sitting on. I really see a lot of potential, particularly as I visited universities and as well as some of the private sector companies. I realized there's a lot of untapped resources that are available. And that's what got me excited. And this is the one reason that I believe that CASA is going to have a huge role, is to enable those developments that are taking place in various places come together in a collaborative way so that it can all be synergistic, so that the nation as a whole will rise, especially in the space industry. So it's basically the potential that I saw in the last few years that prompted me to join CASA, and that's what I'm really excited about.
Thank you.
네, 고맙습니다.
So thank you very much.
우리 대한민국 1호
Now then, the
우주
first
성장사죠. 우주 기업으로서
listed company in aerospace, so Contech, so then the CEO Lee Sung-hee. Yes, great to meet you.
아까 제가 뭐 잠깐 이제 말씀을 좀 드린 부분도 있는데.
Well, then I did talk to you briefly about this, but then many aerospace companies, and then also from what we hear from the outside is that now, of course, CASA, now it is right under the Ministry of Science and Technology, and I believe that there are still some controversies or debates about this. Now, of course, CASA, then, of course, in terms of the R&D, it would be conducted through CARI and CASI, and then also in the commercial divisions about developing the aerospace companies and also international cooperation. That would also fall under CASA as well. But then now when it comes to the space diplomacy, then of course the Ministry of Foreign Affairs would also be involved. Then also for the space R&D, like industrial R&D, then there would also be involvement by the Ministry of Science and Technology or Ministry of Commerce and Trade as well. Again, now then, with CASA opening up, then I wonder whether the roles and responsibilities have all been cleared up and all been defined. Yes, that's a tough question, wasn't it? So let me give you an easy answer. Now, for international cooperation, I do believe that it is vitally important, and that is why even when I was in NASA, so for international cooperation, especially for big projects, then it wasn't NASA working alone. We made sure that we would work together with other agencies in other countries, and I believe that Korea also has to move in that path, that is for sure. Meaning that we are not just one country working alone. We have to be part of the global network. So, of course, we also have to work with other countries to upgrade our technology. So that responsibility falls upon CASA. And also what CARI and CASI are doing now, we're not saying that they have to change the direction now. Of course, the existing mission would continue, while at the same time, with CASA opening up, then how we can further develop the relationships so that we can bring in something additive, something that can be more helpful. In other words, we are not thinking about replacement. We are thinking about additive factors, how we can generate additive factors, and I believe that that is the role for CASA. I hope that has answered your question, and I would come back to a similar question later on during the general discussion time. Thank you. And now, yes, your academy is about 8,000 members strong. So then I would like to ask Mr. Hwang. I wasn't really prepared to ask a question, but very good to see you. I am Hwang Chan-jung, the president of the Korea Society for Aeronautical and Space Science. We have more than 9,000 regular members in the aeronautical and space industries. So now you have more than 9,000, yes. So based on the accumulated new membership, we have more than 9,000.
일단 말씀드리고 싶은 게 저희 이제 우리 한국에 또 항공우주 관련된 저희 학회 회원도 이렇게
We also have the many society members, but we also have many other societies in the fields of aerospace, space science, and so on. So I hope that the Junne could interact with these various organizations and give them the speech and also the presentation, explain them about the roles of CASA and its future. And I think that they will also give you very good comment, constructive comment. We will root for the growth of the CASA, and later I will speak in more detail during the panel discussion session.
고맙습니다. 그러면 사실 이제
All right, thank you. So now then,
5분 정도 좀
we are
쉬셨다가
scheduled to have a 5-minute break, so let us take that break now.
시작할 텐데요.
And then we would begin the discussion time in about at 2:15. And I promise you that it is going to be a discussion that you have never seen before. So with no script at all, we would be having our discussion and also interactions with the audience as well. So thank you.
하시던 종합 토론
Aerospace
시간입니다.
Forum
여러분, 박수 한번 해주십시오.
2024, the moment that we've all been waiting for, the general discussion time. A big hand, please.
좀 전에 빌 넬슨
And of course, we have also heard from
팀장님도
Mr. Bill Nelson of the US NASA, congratulating the opening of CASA. And of course, we have Mr. Charania, and also we have Dr. John Lee, head of missions in CASA. So who have talked about further cooperation for innovating the aerospace ecosystem. So now then also we have the experts in aerospace in Korea and outside. So we have Mr. Charania, and then we have Mr. Lee Sung-hee, CEO of Contact, and Mr. Lee Sang-yu, President of KARI, and Mr. Im Jong-in, Special Cyber Secretary of the Presidential Office, and Mr. Kim Soo-jong from InnoSpace, and President Park Young-duk of KASI, and Vice Chairman Kim Min-seok of the Korea AeroSpace Industries Association, and we have Chang Song-gyu from the director of the Rokoff Headquarters Space Center, and we have Mr. Hwang Chang-jeon, head of the Korea AeroSpace Academy. And now, yes, you know how you suffer blackouts all of a sudden? So, yes, he's such a good friend, right? So, President Kwak Shin-woong, Korean Space Association for National Defense, and also President Lee Jae-woo of the Korea Academy of Space Security. So now, what do you think? Don't you agree that they are indeed the foremost experts from home and abroad? And then also, in the audience, we also have Mr. Lee Tae-sik, who is the president of the Science Administration. And then also sitting next to him, we have Professor Kim Deok-soo of Hanyang University in Mechanical Engineering. So also from Hanwha Systems. So Mr. Choi Sung-hwan, who used to be with the Air Force, and then also next to him from the Air Force Reserve. So yes, would you like to say hi? And it is Vice President An Jae-bong of Contact. So of course there are so many to introduce, and we also have from Hanwha Systems as well, Mr. Kim, who is in charge of the aerospace department. And also next to him, who is it? So we were not able to introduce him earlier, so if you could bring over the microphone. I hope we could have more microphones here among the audience. So if you could introduce yourself. Hello, I am Win Marshall of InnoSpace. Yes, welcome. Thank you. Right, so great indeed. Of course, there are so many others who need to be introduced, but then because of the time, let us now begin. So I myself, I am Go Kwang-bon, who will be serving as a moderator. I'm also the editor-at-large of the Seoul Economic Daily. So now, at this discussion time, we are now going to have a frank discussion about how we are going to continue to innovate the space ecosystem. So now then, let me first ask Mr. Charania. So you're in Korea now, but anyway, so then compared to the NASA's vision and development strategy, then how do you plan to cooperate with Korea? And also maybe some advice to Korea as well?
I think the answer is probably once again similar to working with KARI, KASI, and CASA now. And I think for us, it's looking at helping CASA and John and collaborating with them as we go forward. I think for us, ideas that I have are, as you look at CASA and how it operates, is open science. An important part of what we do at NASA is open science, the data that we have, releasing it to the world, to the scientists of the world. So open science, as you think about things you're thinking about and doing, in all of the Korea technology and science departments, open science is very important to NASA. So that's very important. Another thing I think about are the Artemis Accords. As we look at more countries joining, collaborations, conversations. We recently brought all the Artemis Accord signatories together in Montreal, Canada, to have good discussions amongst all the signatories. And so I think that is very positive, and more collaboration, conversations under the Artemis Accords, and then more collaborations leveraging CARI, CASI, and CASA with your industry. So I think those are things. And then in terms of how we operate, once again, going back to things our space technology mission director is thinking about, and specifically identification of technology shortfalls. And so once again, we have published 187 technology shortfalls that our space technology mission director has put out there publicly. We've asked for comment from US entities, and we'll have an annual process of releasing these shortfalls. And I think that's a very positive process where we're doing in space technology to look at our technology shortfalls, what are most important to our stakeholders, how do they align with our investment portfolio. And so that's a very cool, interesting, and transparent, and also useful process for us in terms of technology investment. So.
네, 좋습니다. 나사는 아무래도 R&D, 뉴
So
스페이스
the NASA
여기에 방점이 좀 찍혀
is
있습니다.
heavily engaged in R&D for new space. Now, from the corporate sector, can anyone? Mr. Lee, maybe?
네, 반갑습니다. 제 컨택이 이승희.
Yes, so I am from the Comtech.
사실은
Very nice to see you.
전 세계 이제 스페이스 컨퍼런스를 가면 사실
When we go to space conference around the world, in fact, the atmosphere is very free. But Korea, somehow, it's very strict. But I will have pretty relaxed presentation. So I have been in the space industry for about 23 years. And I was wondering why Korea just tried to mimic NASA. So that's what I want to say today. So why is very important. Rather than how and what, we have to focus on why when we do something. It's mentioned by the Mr. Charania of the NASA. If we put focus on why, then we can actually go deep into the root cause of the problem. What I was impressed by the NASA's presentation was that after a lunar lander, it is now creating the International Space Station gateway, and that's something that I couldn't understand. Because there are action space and also other existing technologies. So our low orbit space station is now under construction, but why the moon should have another space station? That was my question. So the Toyota or other commercial companies can cooperate, and also for quantum, like Swedish companies could, Swiss companies can also be the partners. So under microgravity condition, what kind of medication should be provided to human being in order to resist the pressure during the launch? So in the end, I think in leading the space industry, I believe multidisciplinary approach is very important. Convergence and cooperation with other industries are the key. So we have to bring technologies from other fields, and we have to cooperate with other industries. So that's actually the question that I would like to ask. And from CASA's perspective, so how you're going to merge technologies of different fields and different industries, how we're going to have a successful convergence of these different fields in order to advance the space exploration. And just like every other industry, in cultivating industry, I think capital and human resources are the key. So for the money investment, starting from last year, the Ministry of Science and Technology, they created the Space Fund, which amounted to 5 billion won. last year and this year again. And also there is a matching fund from the private sector, 5 billion won. So with the 10 billion won, the Korean government says that it's going to nurture the space industry. But it's just very absurd, and the amount is too inappropriate. Luxembourg, I think when it started, its funding started from the 300 billion or 500 billion because it's very costly to develop technologies for space exploration. And so we have about 150 commercial investors who are interested in space technology. So we have investors at home and abroad, and by cooperating with these investors, maybe we can create an effective fund for space exploration, and this is another area that we have to focus on.
프리미어리그식으로 한번 토론을 해봤으면 좋겠어요. 그죠? 프리미어리그 알죠?
So do you know the Premier League in the UK, right? So everything is so fast. So maybe we can mimic the speed of Premier League for our discussion. So we'll continue to hear from the other panelists.
너무 짧게
Well, if the time is too short, then the conversation could be a bit choppy, so then I would like to spend a bit more time. So my name is Kim Min-seok, Vice Chairman of the Korea AeroSpace Industries Association. Now, perhaps among all of you here, I myself may be the beginner in aerospace. So for 40 years, I was in military, defense, security. And then it's only been about a couple of years that I moved over. So that also probably means that I am the least prejudiced. But now, yesterday, the CASA that was opened yesterday, why was this created? Why should it be its mission? And also for the Korean public, then what do they want? What do we want? And what are we thinking about CASA? Now, so far, aerospace in Korea meant state-led development, like the Nuri satellite and so forth, meaning that it was taxpayers' money going into the development. But then now, more recently, as you would know, now that is called old space. Now Elon Musk creating a company called SpaceX, opening up the era of the private sector, sending out into space, and also opening up the aerospace industry. So then, benchmarking this, the Korean president also wanted to move into the new space. So CASA was created for that purpose. Then what is new space? So the satellite that we shoot up into the orbit, so that is not everything about the space economy. So space economy encompasses everything that occurs out in the space. Then that means that we need to redefine the space competition. So Elon Musk has mentioned that he was going to send like over 1 million people to Mars, so like 500,000 people to Mars. So maybe the number could be reduced, but at least now if we are going to have like 500,000 people living on Mars, then we need to create the kind of urban infrastructure that is very large. So then, let's say if it is going to be by 2050, then we need to start building out the infrastructure soon. So that means that somebody has to go out to the Mars, build an outpost, and do the groundwork for us to begin the construction. So then to make all this possible out in space, on Mars, then not just the rockets that we have today, but then also we need to have the people who can build houses on the Mars. So for Korea to build houses in the Mars, then this is very similar to what the construction industry is doing today, what the Korean industries are doing today. So then to lay such infrastructure, then perhaps the technology the US has, but then also that kind of construction can be done by Korea. So maybe in the aerospace we are a bit behind, but then now for other things, like for example, building architectures there and also enabling human settlement, human habitat there, then we can be as good. So then if we are to change the focus, then that means that there are opportunities for Korea to become an aerospace power. But now, one observation that I would like to make. Now, let's say in the past, if you had to go all the way to Busan, then is the goal to take the train to go to Busan or to go to Busan to do the work? Right. Doing the work, getting the work done is the purpose. The train is the means. So if you could be brief. All right, so then the last point. Right, so when at a time when we could go to Busan only by building the KTX, then we needed to have the rocket. But then now, if we can take the Starship to go to Mars to build the infrastructure, then we do not have to build a Starship, meaning that we can take the Starship to get the work done in the Mars. So then that is the point. So we need to change the focus of our endeavors. So that is all. Thank you very much. So now then, the reason why I wanted to hurry things up a little bit is because, now of course, Mr. John Lee, he also has to catch the flight to Sacheon. So then it's about an hour to Gimpo Airport. He also has to wait for about 30 minutes. So now I'd like to go to Kim Soo-jung first.
Yes, so I am CEO of the InnoSpace. My name is Kim Soo-jung. So I think that today's forum is a bit different from the other forums in space technology. Mr. Lee mentioned that why is important for the future of space industry, but I should mention that what and how are as important as why. Because for the past 30 years, we have done a lot of things, and now is the time for us to connect this to create a meaningful outcome. So maybe I burdened John Lee too much, but that's why I think that we all have a very high expectation toward CASA. We have the CARI and also the CASI, and they have made great technological development. However, they could not be applied to the corporate sectors. So I hope that we can see some changes in the future. And with the favorable ecosystem, the companies like us can venture and challenge ourselves. So the space is no longer an era which can be done single-handedly by one country, rather international cooperation is very important. That's why Korea joined Artemis Accord, but we have to have something to contribute in order to have something back. So what can we contribute? I think this is something that CASA should come up with. Just with one company or with one researcher, we cannot do these things. So we have to have a strong cooperation and coordination, and we have to identify what we have, and also we should link the existing advances in order to create the meaningful result. And how is also very important. Companies are making great efforts, especially like startups. They're really dedicated. However, no one can guarantee our success. No one can guarantee our future. That's why the CARI or the CASI, government-sponsored organizations, should engage in creating momentum for international cooperation. And another thing, so we are now making a transition from the old space to new space, and where Korea is located, I think we are still in the in-between. Then, do we have to stick to the past approach and be complacent? Rather, I think that we should challenge ourselves and we have to expand our horizons. I don't necessarily mean that we have to focus on the things that will fail. Rather, we have to take a two-track approach, that we have to have a stable project, but we should also have an innovative, challenging project, so that the small startups can also challenge themselves and venture into this mission. Then I believe that with the least amount of the resources, we can create the maximum impact. And this is actually what Korea
도전적인
excels.
분야에서 성공 사례가 나올 수도
So we
있습니다.
can create some
그런
successful
가능성을
examples
보고
from a
그곳에
very
투자를
challenging area.
해달라는 요청을 좀 드리고
So
싶습니다.
I ask for your investment in these
기업인들의
difficult areas
우리
as well.
항공청에 대한 거는 기대가 지금 엄청 큰데요.
Right.
어깨가 엄청
Thank you. So I see
무거우시겠습니다.
that there are
이
such
부분은
high
한번
expectations
말씀
by the
받아주시죠.
businesses. So now then I would like to go to Dr. Lee again.
영어에 이런 말이 있어요. A rising,
한번
There is a
일어나서
saying in
말씀해
English.
주실까? 네.
A rising
tide lifts all boats.
tide lifts all boats.
카사의 역할은
So I believe that what CASA has to do is to give water so that we can all rise. And as I mentioned earlier, why is of course important, but how
그러니까 how도 중요한 거고.
is as important. And also in my speech, I mentioned that it has to be requirement driven, meaning that if so, of course, if we had a clear purpose, then it can be very effective. But then now, let's say sometimes we make something and then sometimes these steps could be taken backwards. So what I have seen in NASA is that now we would clearly define the requirements and then go for the engineering solutions. But then, of course, the engineering solutions are very important, but then the requirements, if they can be defined earlier, then it will make things easier. And of course, the industries and the businesses, of course, we all know that they would be making their investment. But then for CASA, what we need to do is how they can more effectively achieve their return on investment. So at CASA, we would also have that discussion and study together so that all the boats can rise together. So I do believe that if all the boats in Korea were to rise, then that would mean success for CASA. So I ask for your understanding. And so anyone with a question to Dr. Lee?
그러면
None?
부장님이 지금까지 그
Then-
L4 말씀하셨잖아요.
So you also talked about
L4,
L4, like
탐사를 통해서 우리도 나사랑
being
같이
ambitious,
같이 한번 국제 탐사 나서보자.
becoming
좀
a
해보자
strong
했지 않습니까?
spacefaring
근데 우리나라
country,
우주항공
perhaps
R&D
working together with others like NASA. Now then, as the head of the missions in
펼치실 것인지
CASA, then I would just like to ask you about your vision and strategy, especially when it comes to L4.
The reason I emphasize L4 is because I believe that Korea does have a technology for us to advance into L4. And Korea will, for the first time, go to L4 and play its role. And we can install the payload in L4. So I think that Korea will be the first country that explored the polar region of the moon. If that is possible, then we will not only have the world-class science, we will also have technology. So we will invest in these programs. And I believe that all the technology development will benefit Korea. And I believe Korea does have the technology at disposal. And therefore, if there is a right investment and right encouragement, then only with this, I believe that surely Korea will make a big success. And also, the Mr. Lee talked about the space fund, and it's just the 10 billion won, whereas the Luxembourg, it has the space fund amounting to hundreds of billions of won. And now is the budgeting time, so how are you going to address this issue? So there is a saying that a journey of 100 miles begins with the first step. So we are just taking the first step. But maybe this year we take only first step, but the next year 10 steps, and the year after next year 100 steps. So we should make a gradual improvement. And so we have to clearly define the requirements and programs. Then I believe that the funding from the Ministry of Science and ICT or the Ministry of Finance, I think will naturally come.
이성희 대표님 짧게 한번 말씀.
Right, then if you could be brief. Yes, I will be. So then, The reason why I mentioned that earlier is because now that is because of market positioning. Because right now let's say 5.5 billion, next year 10 billion, now being gradual and slow about it. So I believe that no one is doubting this. But then now, for aerospace, well, actually in any business, we can see that. Now let's say if we develop something today and then try to enter the market 3 years later, then if there is a first mover, then the latecomers have no space left. So then for a state, for the country, then yes, they would open up something and they would put in like prime pumping water. And then we also need to have a bigger push to also establish the market positioning. And that is why perhaps we need something like the Space Fund. And of course, at the L4, and yes, that is something that we can demonstrate the nation's power. And yes, that is something to be done by CASA. And for the others, the businesses can also do this. So yes, you would all know L4 is the Lagrange point 4, so where the gravity is the same out in the space, somewhere between the distance between the Earth and the Sun. And then now, so I'm sorry, but then now we also would invite Mr. Lim Jong-in, Special Cyber Secretary, then also from the Air Force, and then we can let Dr. John Lee go.
So although I'm not a budget expert, but I would like to make some comments on that. So Mr. Kim just mentioned about the new space, and last week on 24th, as many of you know, the pre-feasibility study was conducted and the 320 billion won of the bill was passed. Actually, no one thought that it's achievable because Korea is currently focusing heavily on the quantum and the semiconductor. However, with the support from the Ministry of ICT, the budget bill was passed, and this is to create a new ecosystem. So we talked about the 6G, and 6G becomes available by 2030, and there will be no more roaming. Rather, there will be a global communication that goes seamless without interruption. And also IoT will become commonplace where everything is connected to the internet. And that will be based on the AI and also the quantum computing. And therefore, 6G standard is going to be complete by 2030. That's why we mentioned that we should develop space. That's why the budget bill was passed.
한 말씀 하시고 근데 장성규 센터장이 30초만 하세요.
Then and also, Mr. Chang, maybe you could use 30 seconds. Yes, so I am Jang Sung-gyu, director of the Rokov Headquarters Space Center. So then, we are also mulling over our potential cooperation with CASA. So under CASA, so there is also going to be the Aerospace Policy Directorate as well. So then, for this, there is something that we have been working on for some time. So the Ministry of Defense is also reflecting the views from the Air Force as well. Then also in the Global Sentinel, the Air Force is also taking part in the training, and we are also developing a lot of professionals as well. So we will continue to keep up with the international cooperation so that we can maintain good relations. So now then let me go back to Dr. John Lee before making his exit, but I see that yes, he is in a big hurry. All right, so thank you very much.
So I believe that with the expansion of the CASA, there will be more flights between Seoul and Sachon, but currently we only have one flight per day, so we really have to take it.
가방 들고 일어나가지고 가시니까 어쩔 수가 없네요. 감사하고요.
And again, thank you very much.
오늘 토론회는 유튜브로 스트리밍 되고 있고 이게 녹화돼 있기
And also the today's discussion is live streamed and also it's recorded. So I think CASA will have some opportunity to see our discussion later. Now we will continue with our discussion. So we heard people from corporate sectors, so maybe now we move to
편입되잖아요. NST에서 우리 이상률 원장님하고 박영덕 원장님 말씀 주시고 우리 학회장님
and listen to from the Lee Sang-ryul, the president of CARI.
NST에서 독립이 되는 건
Yes, so we are not separated from the Ministry of Science and Technology.
산하로 가는데
Rather, we are converting from the MST to CASA, so we'll be under CASA. But even if we transit to be under CASA, I think there will be more opportunities for technology cooperation.
뭐 다른 분들이 요즘에 이제 워낙 우주에 관심을 많이 가지시고
As many people become interested in space and give us very constructive feedbacks, and as people who have been in this field for a long time, I would like to make this comment that in the past, R&D for space, it was truly a area that nobody was interested. So I'm very thankful for the growing interest in space science nowadays, as well as the birth of CASA. So I believe that the space science is now becoming a mainstream, and also Korea is also making efforts to rise to the space powerhouse. So our goal is to become number 5 in space science, but as you know, India, its goal is to become number 6 by 2030. So we have to revisit this number and check how feasible it is. And the Seoul Academic Daily Aerospace Forum, it made a huge contribution for the development of the space industry in Korea, and we have many similar fora in Korea. And so I think that after having these forums, there should be somebody who track the progress and monitor the progress so that we can have a sound decision-making process. The establishment of the CASA cannot guarantee success. Rather, we have to have a rational, sound decision-making process. And everybody is talking a lot about the ecosystem, and in the past, there was almost no ecosystem. So what CARI and CASI supported, that was just in the R&D area and nothing related with the commercial sectors. But as we move into the and more commercial players will play an important role. So I think that we have to establish some principles for investment and also to prevent the conflicts of interest and so on. So we have to really do our best to create the right decision-making process and establish guidance and so on. And I hope that we can continue to see this kind of forum so that we can also evolve. And with that, thank you.
Thank you. And then now, yes, Mr. Charania. So, do you find it interesting or a bit boring?
Oh no, this is interesting. I would just say these are the kinds of conversations you have when you're maturing, you know. I remember in America 25 years ago, the debate of how much should commercial industry work with NASA. And as I say, the way we're going back to the moon today would be very strange to some of the NASA leadership of 25 years ago. And so and I remember 25 years ago, those of us in industry, I tell the young people in America who have all these commercial space companies that they could go work for. They could go work for NASA. They could go work for the large companies. I'm like, you take it for granted that this is how it always was. You know, in America 25 years ago, we didn't have some of these companies. And the future that we've given the young people in America took a lot of sweat and effort, and also people from NASA working on the NASA side with industry to make these things happen. So what I'm reminded of, the debates you're having, I remember the debates we were having 25 years ago, which is maybe not a bad thing. You know, that's all I would say is be very optimistic for the future, because this future will not happen without challenge, but we have to keep going, I think.
아니 지금 한국과 미국 간의 우주항공
You
기차가
talked
20에서
about
25년 난다는
and also there is
말씀은
a gap, but that does not necessarily mean that the gap between Korea and the U.S. is like
지금
22
대한민국도 엄청
years
발전했잖아요.
long,
예.
because Korea also has made a lot of advances.
Yeah. No, I think the thing is, once again, where just going back to as we think about technology, what are the toughest challenges, and where can we address those challenges? So I think that's the thing to think about. Of what are the toughest challenges that we have out there, and where can organizations kind of meet those challenges, right? You can't, at NASA, we have many technologies we'd like to invest in, and we have a big budget, but it's not that big. And so we have to choose which technologies we have to invest in and what's the process we're using. Part of that process is also to help our industry. We have a strategic plan at NASA that you can download, and one of the first things I did when I downloaded that, when I read that when I got this job, is read it. And if you read the NASA strategic plan, it is about our objectives and missions, but it's also about working in collaboration with industry, So that's the other thing we're interested in. And the example I give is the X-66 program. It's an aeronautics program where NASA is working with Boeing to develop a new kind of airplane, a truss-braced aircraft that has the potential to reduce carbon emissions by 30%. The company is putting in more money than NASA, but it's a collaboration. And that collaboration only happened because NASA people went out to industry to talk to them. So I don't know, those are some thoughts of like how you face these challenges with industry and with other partners.
네, 감사합니다.
All right, thank you very much for that. So
수사님의 생각은
we have just heard
네이버에
from Mr. Charania.
한국
So then
나사와
let's say what he
우리나라의
thinks
통제 영역
is that
파악이야. 이렇게
we
쳐보시면은
would
그
also,
생각이 상세히 나와 있거든요. 그 인터뷰가
like for example,
있으니까
Naver,
참조해
you would
바라봐요.
also have to think
지금
about
우리 차량의
ways
수출자님,
of
우리
working
좀
with
한국
Naver. So if you
전문가들
type this
말씀 듣고
in, then you
있다고
could
다시
also
한번
search for it.
좋은 말씀 주시기
So
바랍니다.
yes, thank you very much, and I
박영도
will
원장님
come back to you later
청문회도
on. So
나사랑
now then,
아르테미스
to Mr.
프로그램도
Park Young-duk.
하면서
So
해왔지만 또
of course,
청문회도 좀 해왔는데 한번
Kasi
말씀
has
좀
also
주시죠,
been
부장님자.
working on
하여튼
Artemis as well. So
지금 우리가 잘 알다시피
right, so
일론 머스크의
of course
스페이스X
Elon Musk
이후로
and SpaceX. So
우리가
since
우주에 대한 관심이 갑자기
SpaceX, then
증가하게 되고
our interest in aerospace has been much heightened.
우주 개발에
So was the government. So it is now much more committed to aerospace development and giving it a big push. So then thinking about why is the government interested in, committed in aerospace? And that is perhaps to promote the aerospace, to create national interest. In other words, so that we can also find the growth drivers for the nation. Now then, for the aerospace development, what I believe to be the most important is, of course, on one hand, we have the state-driven aerospace development, so we could call this public effort. And then there is also the industry-led effort, so that would be the commercial side. And then there's also what is military-led. So then, when we have balanced development of all these three, then we could have aerospace development for the nation, which could put Korea into the leadership of the aerospace development. But now, for the public development, then I believe that it is important to keep developing the technologies in the publicly funded research institutes, especially for large projects that the private sector cannot start. So if we can develop the technologies from such projects and then also share them with the industries to be commercialized, and then also for the military side, then of course we can also develop the military space, and by doing so we also need to have a quick virtuous cycle among the three. So then what CASA has to do, I believe, is to facilitate the virtuous cycle among the three different spaces. So now then, with CASA being born, then the aerospace development and policy that had been focused on the public side, I believe that now we can also share that focus with the private sector as well as the military side. Now for NASA, then what it does well is the technology transfer to the private sector and collaboration with the private sector. So they're working very closely together, but perhaps we are not there yet. So then that is one thing that I believe that CASA also has to work on. All right, thank you. And also, yes, I actually mentioned briefly Artemis, so that was an invitation for Kasi to also mention your role in Artemis, but then we can also come back to this later on. And then now I would also like to invite the heads of the associations and academies, so then Mr. Hwang and Kwak and Mr. Lee, so then why don't you share with us some good policy recommendations?
Good afternoon. I will talk about three things. Number one, so everybody does have high expectation toward the establishment of the CASA. So maybe some of you are a bit disappointed. But despite that, with the audacious challenge Korea embarked on and established the CASA. So centering around the CASA, we have to create one team that complement and help each other. And the Ministry of Science and Technology said that it's going to grow space industry. So there was a goal, and also they have more specific goals like the number of companies to be established and employees to be hired. And our goal is to achieve 420 trillion won of the revenue. So achieving this financial goal, I think, is a key to achieve other goals. And in order to achieve this CAGR growth rate, I believe, assuming that it's about 18.5%. So assuming that the space industry is growing consistently at the rate of 18.5%, then maybe we can achieve this by 2040 or 2050. But in order to become number 5 in space science in the world, we actually have to accelerate this growth. So how can we secure this large revenue? This is something that we really have to put a lot of thought on, and also we have to focus on. So I think this is the initial focus area for CASA. So some people said that with the establishment of the CASA, they are expecting to see some flagship projects which look very grand. So Mr. John Lee talked about the L4, but can you please be shorter and concise? So we can have multiple rounds of the comments. So how can we contribute to achieving 420 trillion won of the revenue? I think this should be our focus in making investment decisions. And secondly, I think nobody will dare to say, but so I will be talking about the aeronautics as the president of the society. So here you see that even the title of this forum is the Aerospace Forum, which means that the aeronautical industry is something that's indispensable for space science. So what's the revenue source of the airline industry? The K airline or the K defense. These are the areas that we have to secure. And also UAM and AAM. These are another sectors that we have to capture. By 2040, according to Morgan Stanley, they will open a new market worth to be $1 trillion. So should we just leave this huge industry to private sectors, or should CASA should also be involved in a balanced manner in order to come up with a more effective strategy? Because the airline industry could have a lot of failures, and we have very limited resources, and therefore we have to have a control tower that effectively mobilize all the resources for the success.
곽 회장님하고 이 회장님 좀
All right, thank you. And then now President Kwok and President Lee. All right, so allow me to go ahead first. So then I would believe, since I am from the military, I would also have to talk about the military space, and also we have heard from the Air Force as well. But anyway, so of course, CASA would not be directly driving the military space development. So, for example, it would be working with the Air Force or the Defense Industry Administration, so that we will be able to also level up the military space development. What is important is that now something that NASA isn't doing, but CASA must, is to develop the aerospace industry. But then right now, the aerospace industry development plan now that we have under the government, so that is not the final, so it's just a draft. So then now with CASA opening up, then I believe that CASA would have to come up with its own specific plan. And now, even under the current plan, then we would have to come up with a more realistic plan. And then also I see that the organization has not been completed yet, so the recruitment is still continuing. So I believe that CASA has a grace period until the end of this year. And of course, we would be providing our support to ensure its success. Thank you very much. So thank you. And then now I would like to go to President Lee.
My name is Lee Jae-woo from Korea Academy of Space Security. It's indeed my honor to be part of this forum. In the US, NACA was established 110 years ago, and after going through World War I and II, it became NASA. And the first administrator of NASA, he actually clearly defined the scope of NASA's work. And also, NASA wasn't really given an ample amount of budget. Depending on national affairs, sometimes its budget was cut down. And under the current administration in Korea, I think that we can have more budget, but no one could see what will happen in the future. And if you look at watch the movie like Armageddon, it shows that the U.S. is leading the whole world to protect the whole world, and this is the method that instill to many Americans that the U.S. should lead space development. And also it strengthened its national posture, and it actually helped NASA securing more budget. So going back to Korea, CASA is the Korean version of NASA, but I don't really 100% agree to that. So as an agency under the Ministry of Science and ICT, it just established, but securing budget would not be an easy task. Rather, they have to have a precise strategy. And also, the NASA focuses on R&D, whereas CASA's role could be a bit different. So rather than serving as the cradle of R&D, it should serve as an agency, a control tower that leads the space policy and space industry in Korea. In other words, it's a control tower for space economy. So a lot of people are saying that the future is with space and future space is important. But actually a lot of talents who study space science have no place to work. And therefore expanding space economy is also very important so that the space talents could have decent jobs. So it should be done not just by the R&D, rather right strategies and policies should be developed. Otherwise, I don't think that the CASA could secure the sufficient amount of budget. And without budget, things will really be difficult. And another thing that we have to focus on is the defense. And I believe defense is also a very big part of space. So how can we strengthen our defense power and have a synergistic growth with the space industry? And since I am working for the Korea Society of Space Security, that's why I talk about the importance of defense. Anyway, so the CASA is something that we have been waiting for long, so we really congratulate. But at the same time, we have some lingering concerns as well, and I hope that these concerns could be addressed.
So thank you very much for the very good recommendation, and also Mr. Andy, who is the head of NASA Japan. So now NASA, of course, is much ahead of CASA, and also in the first part, it was mentioned that NASA is R&D center. And venture startup promotion perhaps is not very high on priority. But then now, among the 25 trillion of NASA budget, 20 comes from the private sector, isn't it? So NASA also has very challenging R&D for the future, but also now for the aerospace venture and startups, it also work together with them and also provide them with a lot of support. So maybe you could also explain a bit about that. And then now, second part, so then maybe you can also go to Mr. Andy from NASA Japan. So then, of course, Japan is a very strong aerospace player. And now in Japan, so like, for example, in the launch system or the satellite, and also the venture startup ecosystem. So Japan government is also working very hard to promote them. So then perhaps you can also share with us the trend in Japan today.
So I think we are, in America, commercial space, as I like to say, is many different spectrums of organizations. So there are publicly traded commercial space companies, there are venture-backed commercial space companies, and then there are kind of individual-backed kind of space companies as well. And there's all different spectrums of commercial space. So commercial space to me is not just one type of company. So that's one thing to keep in mind. I think we are working with companies from small to medium to large. We have a large investment we put into small business contracts called SBIRs, Small Business Innovative Research, where we offer seed funding for technology development for small companies specifically. We have a program many years ago we started called Tipping Points, which is where companies can put in funding, and we will put in more than they might put in, but they have a minimum threshold, maybe 25% of a project's value they need to put in for a topic that's useful to us and useful to them. And that has brought in some new companies. There are models that within the Department of Defense that they are leveraging this commercial ecosystem as well in terms of kind of similar types of contracts for some of these more entrepreneurial ventures. There are prize competitions we have at NASA that allow some of these organizations to participate in novel challenges that we have. And so I think there's a spectrum of contracts and mechanisms we have to engage the small companies. And we make an intent, and we legally have to, but we also want to work with these small companies as part of our budget and then have collaborations where if they feel interest and they put in some funding, then we can also work with them in terms of those kinds of projects. So, Andy.
예, 그 앞으로 나사가 우리 한국의 우주 항공 벤처 스타트업하고도
I believe that NASA can also closely cooperate with the venture startups in Korea, and I hope that you can contribute to promoting that partnership.
제가 이렇게 긴밀하게 좀 협력하는 데 있어서 앞장서 달라니까 저기 이지연
And we have the Ms. Lee Ji-yeon from the U.S. Embassy.
전문위원도 좀 많이 노력을 좀 해주세요.
I hope that you can also work hard to promote partnership.
예, 우리 이제 미스터 앤디, 이제 이슈
And Mr. Andy.
Thanks so much. Yep, so Andy Maciel, NASA Asia representative. So I believe you asked a question about Japan and what they're doing with the commercial sector. So I can answer that, but you know, the government of Japan has a space strategic fund that they just implemented. So they have a 1 trillion yen fund over 10 years, where JAXA would be, allocating that to their commercial and research sectors. So I think that was, an answer to your question about Japan. But also just wanted to, of course, echo NASA Administrator and welcoming and congratulating CASA. Of course, we have a very good relationship with CARI and CASI that we are looking forward to continuing, and then having these discussions, with CASA and continuing with CARI and CASA as our space agency partners. Thanks so much.
예, 그래서 미스터 앤디. 그래서 지금 우리
So, Mr. Andy,
일본의
my question is
항공
that in Japan, what are the changes in the space ecosystem in Japan? And also, as a person who oversees the APEC operation, can you please describe what is the current landscape and also what's your future direction for stronger cooperation with the private sector?
Thanks so much. So landscape in Japan, of course, they're looking at, as we are, low Earth orbit after the International Space Station. So in terms of, things that they're looking at, of course, looking at developing the lunar economy. So not just as partners on Artemis, but they're also looking at what their industry could do for future lunar missions. So that's kind of some of the things that they're focused on. What was your other question?
지금 일본에서 그 우주 항공
So
벤처
again,
스타트업 생태계는 좀 어떻게 돼요?
what's the current landscape of the ecosystem for the space venture startups in Japan?
Oh, that's a great question. Actually, I'd have to get back to you on that one. So beyond what I answered of what they're looking at, so with this strategic fund, where they're really looking to develop their industry too to feed into what their space agency is doing. So.
그럼 하나만 더. 나사가 우리
Well, then one more. So then for NASA, so CASA working very closely together, and also NASA and JAXA, you also have very long cooperation. So then Korea is quite envious of that because Japan, they already succeeded in having their own launch system in the early 70s. Of course, Korea is working on it, so we have gone through the pilot testing. We are now upgrading our own launch system, but then now in Korea, so we are thinking, why is the US transferring all its technologies on the launch system to Japan, deregulating everything, but then why is Korea coming only after Japan? So it's kind of something like a grievance among Koreans because Koreans also have a very strong conviction about the Korea-US alliance. But then it seems as if for the US, it's always Japan first, Korea second. So we have this kind of grievance, but then what does it look like in Japan?
너무 부담 갖지는 마시고요. 네.
So no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure, of course. Well, I'd say, I wouldn't say we're transferring the launch technology to Japan. What I would say, from the U.S. perspective, both Korea and Japan are important partners. So we're not putting one against the other at all. They're both important partners to us, first and foremost. On the launch things, I'd actually encourage you to speak with my colleagues at the embassy, because that's more of a U.S. government policy, not necessarily a NASA policy. And then I'd echo what AC said earlier too. We're looking forward to having these discussions, with CASA, with the space agency representative of Korea. So, thanks.
한 말씀.
미스터 앤디에게 박수 한번 보내주십시오.
A big hand to Mr. Andy, please.
사회자님.
앤디 당황하셨어요?
So were you caught off guard?
당황하지는 않으셨죠?
I hope not.
Not at all. Not at all. Very happy to answer those questions.
예, 고맙습니다. 자, 그러면은 자 이런 식으로
All right, thank you.
이제
So
우리 토론이
then,
돌아간다는
yes,
거 이제
so
여러분 다
this is
이해하셨죠?
how it works. So now you all see it. So then we will hear from a few more, and then. So may I add a few comments? Yes, please.
나사와 작사를 말씀하시는데.
So we keep talking about the NASA and JAXA
나사하고
But
일본을 따라갈 필요는 없어요.
we don't really have to
사실은
follow the
여러분들
footsteps
잘
of NASA or JAXA.
나사가 지금의 모습을
NASA, in order to become what it is today, in fact, changes were somehow driven by external forces as well. I'm very sorry to mention that, but
그 소련의 스푸트니크
as you know, after the Sputnik shock from the USSR, the NASA was created in order to increase the competitiveness and to respond to Russia. That's why there was a huge budgetary support outpoured. But what we are trying to do is to develop a new space industry. So it should be based on the reasonable costing. And it's no longer the issue of the rivalry. NASA, in the past, they gave the task to the Lockheed Martin or the Boeing, and regardless of cost, and they even secured the 7 to 8% of the profit. In other words, a lot of taxpayers' money was outpoured to this project, and it was very inefficient. But then the Elon Musk came, and he initiated the space business in the private sector, and that actually forced NASA to change. So we should not blindly follow the footsteps of the NASA. And also, even for Japan, I think that it launched its vehicle, but it's not really competitive. It's not lucrative. It's not beneficial for blue space. So Korea should charter its own territory and charter its own path. I think that Korea is 18 years behind in terms of technology. But when it comes to space economics, in other words, living and establishing infrastructure in the space, I believe that Korea has achieved like 90% of what the US has achieved. So we have to really broaden our perspectives and change our perspectives. And with that, maybe we can directly leapfrog into the space powerhouse. So for this, we have to change our perspectives. And we have President from Kasi and Kari. But aside from this, maybe like construction or ICT or bioscience, these are the areas where Korea is very strong. And if these disciplines are conversed and combined with the space science, this will truly give a strong edge to Korea. However, we don't really have the legal framework that can boost and promote these cross-industry cooperations. So we have to, again, change our perspectives and establish a legal framework for the inter-industry, cross-industry cooperation. Then I believe that we will be able to achieve 420 trillion won. But without changing our mindset, we can never achieve this goal.
지금 우리 윤영빈 우주총장님은
And also, Mr. Yoon Hyung-bin,
작사를 만드는 게 바람직하다.
now he was saying that we needed to have something like the Korean version of JAXA, because now the Ministry of Science was saying that we need to have something like the Korean NASA, but then now, but Mr. Kim was saying that we need to go beyond JAXA or NASA. We need to have Korea's own CASA, meaning that we needn't follow anyone. So yes, and also Mr. Lee and also President Lee, so you raise your hand. So right, so since you're talking about Japan, I would just like to chime in a little bit. So of course, Mr. Kim earlier said something that I found impressive. So now whenever we go to these international conferences, then of course in Korea we used to be, well, we say that we used to be on the margin, but I do not agree. So what I tell my employees is that now you are the world's top class in your field. Now, fortunately, the current government is giving a very big push to aerospace, and that is how we were able to be listed on KOSDAQ. And of course, Mr. Kim is also getting ready to list his own company. But anyway, so when I also work together with the government, I also received a lot of private funding. Now, I asked for more space funding because, well, I mean, my company doesn't need much more funding now, but then for the other companies, I hope that they can also grow more based on more funding, and that is why I mentioned this. Now, I am also going to a Space Tide in Japan, and I was invited as a Korean leading company. Now, there's also SIS, the Space Industry for Federation of Asia, that's in Japan. So then, and it is from the JAXA, the administrator, and also Space Tide, the director. What they asked me is, how did Korea make its aerospace ecosystem so the companies like Contact get listed and you have more revenue than Japanese companies? And that is true. So among the many aerospace companies in Japan, not many of them have more revenue than us. So of course, the Vice President mentioned earlier that we don't need to follow the Japanese system, but then now Japan is actually wondering about the Korean ecosystem. And I believe that the Korean government is moving very strategically, and also among the government. So then I go to some kind of committee in the Ministry of Science and Technology, and I see that the government officials, they have a lot of questions, a lot of issues, and so now they're thinking even harder with CASA. So I see that they have a lot on their shoulders. And so we are saying that this is like the Korean NASA, and perhaps because it's a fancy name, but then it's not because we want to follow the example of NASA, but now of course perhaps it is something like a model for aerospace, but then again, it would have to be right for the Korean environment, so in terms of the funding or the human resources. So I was also in KAIST yesterday, and I was also talking about this with the director of the KAIST HR Development Institute, and how we can develop more human resources for the aerospace industry, and also I'm sure that the government is also mulling over this question as well. So I wanted to say this. So don't ask yourself what the state can do for you, but what you can do for the government. So isn't that the Kennedy quote from the 60s? Right, so I believe that the private sector also need to have that kind of mindset. So when we also when someone also talked about like the super competitiveness, and I asked them, what is super competitiveness? So you get a lot of support from the government, and then now you have to work to prove the super competitiveness of the nation. So then, of course, I don't work for the government, but I say these things on behalf of the government. So of course, we have the special cyber secretary as well, but then now, so for the Korean CASA, then I believe that what it has to be, we all have to think about this together.
아까는 좀 비판적이셨는데 이번에는 또 우리 한국 정부 잘한다고 또 하니까.
So somehow I think you're critical to the Korean government, but also you pointed out the things that Korean government does well.
사실 우리 이상률 원장님하고 굉장히 오래 전부터 우리 대한민국 우주항공 혁신 생태계 어떻게 만들어야 되느냐.
We have talked a lot about how to create the ecosystem for Korea aerospace industry, and he's very, very passionate in this topic. So we say that the CASA will be the Korean version of NASA or JAXA, but the naming itself is not that important. But I don't think it's right to aim to become the Korean version of JAXA. Why? Because when establishing CASA, the first thing that we wanted to have is to have the control tower that oversees the R&D policies and in the space science. Then I have a question. Do you think that the JAXA is a control tower in Japan? No. There is another division under the Prime Minister's office. That's the control tower, because that's where the policy and visions are laid out. That's not JAXA's role. And also for NASA, what I understand is that NASA headquarters, I think it's close to CASA. And the field centers of NASA is different from CASA. That's why I said that we have to have a well-defined decision-making process. And also this kind of forum should not be a one-off event. Rather, it should be continuous. And someone should take note of what we discuss so that we can trace back and monitor the progress. And it requires more than declaration. We have to create our own model for CASA. And with regards to new space, I don't really say in public, but because it was mentioned by Mr. Lee, so I will say that. So when it comes to new space, so in order to excel the old space model, companies should be able to come up with their own idea, create funds, and also deliver meaningful outcomes, create profits, and then reinvest. So there must be these cycles. However, the startups, they have death valleys and they have difficulties. That's why government should support them. But I don't think that's the new space. New space is an ecosystem where companies can sustain themselves. Anyway, so with this kind of forum, we have to project the various ideas in order to navigate the way forward. And in this sense, I believe this kind of forum is very, very meaningful opportunity, and I'm very grateful to be part of this forum.
So then, Chairman Lee, then in the next round, I hope for bolder comments later on. So yes, thank you very much for that too. Right, so to be very frank, so now I'm not going to name you anymore. So if you have any comments, then just please raise your hand, then we will just have free discussion. And if not, then we can go to the audience. So anyone? Well then, Mr. Chang Sung-gyu, director of the Rokoff Space Center, so you didn't get enough time earlier, so then, now of course from the Air Force, now I would say that the military space is also very important, but then even for the CASA, so lack of cooperation system with the Air Force today. Of course, from the military, it's the Air Force that has been developing the aerospace, and of course, the U.S. Space Force is also after the Air Force. Anyway, so what do you think? Right, so what I wanted to tell Dr. John Lee was not something brief, but then I believe that I was able to convey my message. And also, for what we do, so we also have a chance to meet with the private sector together with DAPA and others, and what we hear from them is that what we can directly support is not just about the contracting, but then also for us to share our long-term roadmap, and then for us to also absorb the capabilities of the private sector, and then to come up with another roadmap for the long term. So I think what we can do is keep creating the demand for the needs. And now, of course, the aerospace, there continues to be spin-off. Then, of course, we can also create needs and demands out of the Air Force as well. So once we continue to do that, then I believe that perhaps we can move on to the spin-on phase where the businesses will be able to generate their own profits. So, of course, we always talk about technology first or operation first. So we talk about this with the businesses, but then now for the military space, then technology is first, and of course we also have to make sure that technology does not leave the country. So we always try to hear from the businesses first, and of course if there is a way for us to achieve the technology earlier, then we try to adjust the roadmap. So when I was in the Quantum TF then, now many of the things that we thought a few years ago that would be possible by only 2040, now it seems as if many of them would be possible by 2030. So we are also adjusting our roadmap according to that. And so as we cooperate with the businesses, we will remain open about technology development as well. And also what I would like to ask of the businesses is that for them to be frank with us as well in terms of the technological development and the timeline.
고맙습니다. 네.
Well, thank you very much for that.
공군에서도
And of course, from the Air Force,
좀 긴밀하게 협력을 해야
now
되잖아요.
you would also have to work closely with
파견
CASA,
문제는 좀
but
해결됐나요?
now what about the secondment? Has that been settled? Well, secondment, we are talking about that with the Ministry of Defense and also for the policy and the risk response from the CASA side. Well, maybe not, it doesn't have to be like in the form of secondment, but then now what Kari and CASI are doing and also what the Air Force are doing, so in terms of the risk response, I mean, it remains. So wherever we are needed, whenever our capability is needed, then we will provide it. And for that, we also have our annual training. We also have our cooperation with the US, and we also have our cooperation with other countries that are active on the aerospace. So this know-how, this asset would be necessary for CASA, and whenever it's needed, then we will provide it.
이제 공군에서 이제 우리 뭐 더 이상 요청 안 할 테니까 우주항공청 필요하면 우리한테 얘기해라. 뭐 약간 그런 뉘앙스였죠. 사실 이게 이상윤 원장님하고도 저하고도 무수한 얘기를 많이 한 건데.
And so we talked a lot with the President Lee and the governance system of the CASA, which is currently under the Ministry of Science. A lot of people pointed out the problems. But anyway, the CASA has come into being, and we have to support and create the ecosystem under CASA.
좀뭐 다들 좀 아쉬워 사실은 지금의 우주항공청의 거버넌스 체계에 대해서는 아쉬워하는.
So with regards to the governance system for CASA, I think there are some areas for improvement, and this is something that we have to work together. If there is any representative from the Ministry of Science, I would like to hand over the microphone, because Ministry of Science,
이런 생각에서는 좀 벗어나야 돼요.
I think that they should be away from the mindset that the CASA belongs to it.
빠져버립니다. 같이 이제 개방.
Rather, we have to pursue open innovation. Why? Because whether it's the France or the US public organization requires the strong cooperation, but there is a hierarchy in the government organization. So that's why Japan put its strategic division under the Prime Minister's office, where JAXA belongs to. So shall we open the floor for Q&A? Question or anyone to comment? Mr. Park? Because you talked about the Artemis, I would like to make some comments on that.
실제로 이 나사에서 아르테미스를 시작했고,
So NASA began the Artemis initiative, and with this, many countries, including India, Japan, and many others, they are all trying to venture into moon. But what's important is not just to take part in Artemis. What's important, what's really important, is that the paradigm of the global space policy is now being changed. In other words, our policy so far was like toward the Earth.
우리가 갈 수 있는 가장 가까이 사람이 갈 수 있는 곳이 지금
And
달이지
the
않습니까?
farthest frontier for human beings to reach is currently moon. But only after a year after the Artemis, the NASA announced the M2M. In other words, from moon to Mars.
달에서 화성으로 가겠다는 거죠.
So it said that it's going to Mars. And that's truly a big step forward. And there is a company in the US called Axiom. And Boyoung Pharma in Korea made an investment in this company. This Axiom, do you know what project they're engaged in? They are actually pursuing the project to reach a star. Of course, it's very challenging, very audacious, but very bold.
처음에 시작한 거는 6명의 우주 비행사가 $100,000,000씩.
It started with the 6 astronauts who made investment of $1 million each, and in 6 to 7 years, they actually garnered the investment fund of 3 trillion won. 3
이게
trillion.
결국은 우리가 우주 정책, 우주 개발 전 세계적인 우주 개발 정책의 패러다임이
So this indicates that the global space development policies have been changed, and more policies are now targeting the deep space or outer space. So with the deep space exploration, the humanities will make advance, and this is where we should focus on. That's why we target moon, and then from moon to Mars, and even beyond. So we will make these gradual advances, and this is something that we have to be aware. And when it comes to deep space exploration, I believe that a lot of industries will be created in the process. So rockets should be developed, of course. But for the deep space exploration, various industries should be promoted and created. So I'm sure that this will create a lot of opportunities.
Right, so that was President Park talking about the importance of deep space exploration. Now then, let me go back to Mr. Charanian. So then for Korea, of course, Artemis Accord, so we also joined the Artemis Accord a few years back. So then, but now, for NASA, from NASA's perspective, and of course, Artemis Accord, so we have Kari, Kasi as well. Then how is it working now? So what's the progress so far? So anything visible? So we don't see, I don't think there are much visible achievements yet.
Well, I think we are signing up more countries. One achievement is the number of countries we have, more than 30 plus countries now, which is a good sign. So I think that is an achievement. We are now having more forum of trying to determine how do we work together on some of these issues like interoperability or deconfliction or non-interference. And for instance, some of it is working with all the signatories. Like I mentioned recently, I think last week, we had a meeting of the Artemis Accord signatories in Montreal, Canada. And part of those meetings now are let's bring up a topic in those meetings with these accord signatories and discuss a particular topic. So I think I see within the signatories and the meetings we're having with them more focused discussions, brainstorming on certain topics, taking the themes of this Artemis Accords from non-interference to orbital debris, to deconfliction, to rescue, and taking those issues one at a time in conversations. I'm very, I think we all and at NASA do realize we've created a very powerful group with the Artemis Accords. And now's the moment we're thinking about how to best leverage them in these, when we meet with this group. So I'd say stay tuned. There's some, I think the last meeting that we had in Montreal was very productive, and some very good conversations were had with these signatories. So, and I think the other thing for me, it's a signal to companies in these countries to think about how they would work in the Artemis program, right? So I think it's a big thing governments can do is demand signals, on technologies or missions, and I think the Artemis Accords give a demand signal to the companies and academia and universities in the Artemis Accord signatory countries of this powerful vision their country has signed up to, along with us and all the other countries. So.
Well, thank you very much. So yes, we will keep looking to it. So yes, close to 40 countries now. So in the Artemis Accord and a lot of projects there. Then also with Korea's CASA and also for the Korean companies. And so then any role expected of them. So for example, maybe this is the cooperation that we need with CASA or the Korean companies.
Well, I think now, as mentioned before, I think this is why I'm very happy with CASA, and we are looking forward to conversations within the Artemis Accords framework. And also, I think the other thing for me is to bring more entities to the Accords framework through CASA. As CASA, such in Kari and Kasi and other entities, to bring more voices to that conversation. Now, if CASA is representing different parts of the Korean government, but also the industry. So I think that's a good thing And I think we look forward to working with John and CASA in the Arms Accords, in open science, in other conversations we want to have with the Korean government and the Korean space industry. So I think that's a positive sign in some sense of having now this hopefully useful set of conversations now with CASA representing multiple different stakeholders. So I think that's going to be exciting.
네, 감사합니다. 토론 재밌어요?
Thank you. Thank you. So is it fun for you too? So yes.
그러면 청정석으로 한 마이크 한번 돌려보세요.
All right. So now then, why don't we turn the microphone to the audience? So now, yes. So you are an aerospace expert. So then, yes, Mr. Lee Tae-sik, could you bring the microphone over here? So to this side, yes. So to this side, please.
토론 잘 들었습니다.
Yes, so thank you very much for the discussion, and especially to Vice President Kim Min-seok. So thank you very much about the aerospace industry, and then also, of course, all others. I mean, thank you very much for your talk, but also to Mr. Kim Min-seok. So you mentioned that we need to set the priority. So anyone invited to Sacheon on Thursday? So perhaps any of you invited to Sacheon for the CASA opening in 2 days' time. So yes, they're going to have the opening ceremony for CASA on that day. And now, yes, Vice Chair Kim Min-seok, he was there for the discussion, roundtable discussion in Sacheon, and we saw a lot of the members of the provincial assembly sitting on the front seats. So I think that's how it is. So yes, so CASA will be having its opening ceremony in 2 days' time. None of us are invited there. So then perhaps what we envision is CASA is not the CASA that it is today. So yes, we have been spending a lot of time about what CASA should be or is. But so I believe that what we need is now first about the funding or the budget. So somebody talked about funding, so not enough funding. And they say that 500 are needed, but right now it's like 50 or 100, or right now 130. Okay, so they increased 30. Right, so the full headcount would be 293. Right, and then also others are like lack of philosophy or the vision for the future, and also mission and strategic planning. So none of them has been decided yet. So again, my point is, so we talk about what we want, and also, yes, it was mentioned that CASA is going to play the role of a headquarter, and right, so we should not think that CASA would be doing everything. And of course, when Kari and Kasi were also joining CASA, we thought that a lot of things would be done, but then perhaps not everything is ready yet. So then, of course, we have had very good discussions so far, and we also have to make sure that they are reflected into the policy, or maybe we should have a petition. We should sign a petition, to have enough funding, to have enough people, come up with the vision and mission and strategic planning, to make this a requirement to CASA. But anyway, so that will be all. Now, Moon to Mars conference will be held tomorrow in Hwacheon, so I would like to invite you all. 230 have already requested participation, and we would also talk about AI, and also we have the Space Policy Committee, and right, so what you have mentioned is a priority, so we would also be prioritizing the task, so I would like to ask for your input as well. Thank you. Right, thank you. So then, so Mr. Lee asked whether anyone was invited, and there was one. And also, Mr. Charanya coming now, so it was known earlier, but right, yes, so thank you very much. So yes, there should have been a meeting today, but anyway, so then in the morning with President Lee Sang-yul, there was a meeting with Mr. Charania, but then I see that but also from CASA, we couldn't have attendance because of the flight. And then also Mr. Charania, he also wants to go to the opening ceremony, but perhaps not yet. So perhaps things are not all tidy yet. But of course, the journey of 1,000 miles begin with one step. So now let's give it our full attention and wait for it to get things ready. Now, since we have the microphone among the audience, so now then, given the time limit, let me ask everyone to be brief. So then, Mr. Choi Sung-wan, so who was with the Air Force and now with the businesses, please go ahead.
Okay, so I retired from the Korea Air Force last year and I joined the defense company.
미국도 보면 노스롭 그룹이라든지 락히드 마틴,
Northrop Grumman or the Lockheed Martin, there are many defense companies in the U.S.
그런 나사와 우주 방산 기업과의 관계.
So what's their relationship with NASA?
우주 방산 기업들의
And also,
모델은
what's the model of the defense company that NASA wants to see?
네, 좋습니다.
So that's the question.
같이
So maybe we can collect all the questions and then give you the chance later to answer. Next to him, from Hanyang University, Professor Kim Deok-soo, mechanical engineering. You study your own business as well, right? Yes. So I am Kim Deok-soo, professor of Hanyang University, and I actually created my own business. I am a latecomer and my business is very small, but I want to facilitate the growth. I want to go fast. There are things that we have to do and things that we can excel and things that we can make money. And these could be in conflict relationship, but sometimes they can go together. So in Korea, if you want to excel, then you really have to be open-minded. And you have to share your resources and talent. And you have to establish a strategy. And that's, I think, what CASA should support. And so I hope that, so I'd like to give you the example of my company. So my company is called Space Map. And NASA is paying attention to my company, and Space Force is also trying to work with us. And Samsung is also paying a keen attention to our technology. I myself, I studied the math, but I somehow voluntarily joined the space field. So in other words, there are numerous technologies that can be utilized for space industry. So with that, that's my comment.
감사합니다.
All right, thank you. Then now I see that the time is getting close for us to wrap up. So then, why don't I? Well, if I were to go to Mr. Charania, then perhaps we would have to conclude at that time. So then we would hear from the Korean experts, and then I would like to go to Mr. Charania as the last speaker. So then I keep touching you like this. So is this all right?
이 만약에 여성이면은 더 안 되는 건데 남성도 미군군하는
So just trying to understand the right manners in the U.S. So I'm just showing you how I feel like a friend. Anyway, so now then, I would like to ask for the others to provide your constructive ideas or recommendations, and then we would like to come back to Mr. Charania as the last speaker. Right then, about constructive ideas, well, now we have the Mr. Lee, so President Lee, and also some others also emphasized defense space, but then now looking at the CASA Act, then we see that the military aerospace, that is separate, meaning that it does not fall under the responsibility of CASA. But then, actually, for CASA, it also has the responsibility for cooperation. So yes, that is where we can work with. But then now, What I hear from other conferences is that military aerospace is really the fundamental basis for demand for aerospace in Korea, because that is where we have a lot of technological demand and also a lot of budget. So perhaps that is right. But then perhaps for space, it is a bit different. So now let's say you could have like a LEO or satellite, and then now the interesting areas would only be about 2%. But then for the remaining 98% of the areas that the military is not interested in, how are we going to justify this? So we need to give this back to the people or to where it is needed. Then, of course, we need to promote the businesses and also develop the human resources. But if we are to develop them all in the military, then not everything can trickle down to the private sector. But if we develop this in the private sector, this can also be shared with the defense side. So then perhaps we could share, if we can share the supply chain for the aerospace between the private sector and the military, then this would be helpful for the private sector, and this would also be helpful for the defense as well. And so I have also saying this in on other occasions, but now it's not gaining traction, so I'm saying this again. So then about the military space, then let me go to Mr. Lee as well. Well, it's not a response to the previous comments, but then now it was mentioned earlier about how Korea, in terms of technology, is someone was saying complaining that so Korea did not receive the technology transfer compared to Japan. Well, then during the Cold War period, perhaps there were some political reasons for that. But then now looking at it more recently, then technology, it also comes down to give and take, right? It's give and take. So then, in the case of Japan, Japan also has a lot to offer to the U.S., meaning that it also can receive a lot. So then, looking at it from that perspective, then rather than begging for technology, I think we have to be on equal footing. So perhaps we need to think about exchanging outstanding technology with each other, and also especially in aerospace, especially in the aerospace security, then now, with the Korean international standing rising, then in terms of aerospace technology, like for example, launch system technology or the space surveillance technology, now it is improving, gaining a lot of attention from other countries. So then when we are called for when we ask for international cooperation, then we see that they are more active. So what this means is that if we can keep developing our own technology, then we can be more confident in working together with other countries. So then on that note, then I hope that CASA can also come up with a very good technological roadmap. So yes, I fully agree with what you said.
So I have never said that the CASA should oversee the defense operation. But CASA, under the Ministry of Science and ICT, so if it develop its technology, then I think these technologies will eventually be used by defense sectors. For example, like the communication technology that like Etri develops or the other industries develop, then they will be utilized by the military and also the Defense Administration and CASA. We have people from Etri as well, right? I'm very sorry for the time constraint. I should have given the microphone to Etri representative because it's also the agency that focuses a lot on the space development. Mr. Huang, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I will be very brief. So I have a question to Charania, that Korea's role in Artemis initiative is something that we have to define by analyzing our own capabilities. And from Moon to Mars, I believe there are many, many opportunities. So regarding Moon to Mars, I believe that this is the area that CASA should focus on, trying to find out what Korea can offer. So do you have any advice for that? So please remember your question. There are many, many questions. Remember.
And then, yes, Mr. Chang. Right, so thank you very much for giving me another opportunity. So then, yes, we talked about the small satellite. And right, so for the 98%, what can the military do? Well, fortunately, it's a multi-ministry project, and also we have some time. So I believe until like 2050. So in that time, we could also do a lot, and we can also listen to the businesses, and also if we can have spin-off, then well, I mean, we started early because we were in a bit of a hurry. But then once it is stabilized, and of course, it can also be utilized by the private sector as well. Thank you. Then Vice President Kim Min-seok. Well, I believe now is a time of imagination. The world is moving faster than we imagine. So in 1974, so 50 years ago, I was in first grade of high school. Now, 50 years flew by. Then what would happen in the next 50 years? We will be passing by Mars, I believe. So we would be living in Mars, and also we would be even passing through Mars to go somewhere else, excavating, building things, living there. So thinking about 2100, it's not that far away. I mean, we might be living on Saturn or something. So then humanity living on Earth, I think we've lived out our life on the Earth. I mean, we would continue living here, but I believe that it is just going to be another planet. So now the humanity is ready to be interplanetary species. Now Korea might be small, but then Korea out in space might be much larger. So if we can have this kind of imagination, then the space economy for Korea would also be much larger. So thank you. Thank you.
예, 끝낼까요?
Just wrap up here. You can skip.
우주는 아까 말씀드렸다시피
As I said earlier, space is a realm of opportunity.
꿈과 희망이 있는
And so this is where we can dream, we can
여러
hope.
가지 기술들이 융합적으로
I hope that various technologies will be converged and newly created in this realm, and I believe that proves that the space industry has enormous potential for growth, and all the other industries can contribute, and also can also be the cradle of many new industries. So I sincerely hope that Korea will be a leading country for space development, and we all can work for that. Mr. Kim?
예, 저는 우리나라 우주 산업 활성화를 위해서 지금 필요한 부분은
In order to promote the development of space industry, what we need, I think, is to have a smart challenge. We should not be blind. Rather, we have to have a challenging mindset, but we should not focus ourselves wholly only on success. When it comes to UAE, in terms of human resources or technologies, it actually lags behind Korea, but it has formulated a strong partnership with the US with meaningful opportunities to be created. So we can have a lot of hint from what UAE does.
감사합니다.
Thank you very much. And now also Mr. Im Jong-in, Special Cyber Secretary. Right, so I am a cyber secretary, but then before then, for 40 years, I studied cybersecurity in schools. So now, you know, whenever we say AI, then a few trillion won is collected right away, close to like 100 trillion. So AI, now people have so many expectations of it, and it is going to reap a lot of changes. But then now when we say like AI, safety, security, trust, so they are important topics today. And of course, as Vice President Kim Min-seok has just mentioned, aerospace is also getting a lot of attention. And for aerospace industry to also develop, then it means that it also has a broader applicability, and safety, security, trust must also be in here. Now, last year I saw that on the NASA and also NIST, so from NIST then, in the commercial space, so they came up with the cybersecurity frame for the commercial security, and they were saying that this must become a requisite. So I believe that we also need to have participation from other fields to create an ecosystem for us to grow this field further. So thank you very much. And yes, I will be very, very brief. Right, so space, now whether AI or defense or space itself, so whatever it is, I kept saying that it is an infrastructure. So for us to develop this infrastructure is what is given to us. So I hope that we do not forget about this, and I hope that we can all work together to develop this infrastructure further. And then thank you. So Mr. Lee Sang-hee,
결의만
Right, so I will
말씀드리겠습니다.
be very brief as well. So I will just share with you my commitments. So contact, we have about like 4 companies under us. And so what we are targeting is to become something like the Korean Airbus or Korean Thales. So to show the world that we can also have such companies in Korea. So I hope that we can do that so that we can also contribute to the national economy. Right, the Korean SpaceX or Korean Starlink. So nothing like that, but European companies are the benchmark.
자, 그럼 이제 대미를
All right, then
장식할
yes,
시간인데
someone
여러분 격려의
who
박수 한번 보내주세요.
is going to be the final speaker. So big hand to Mr.
많은
Charania.
의견 다 기억하시죠? 머리가 좋으니까.
I'm sure you remember all the questions, right? You're smart enough.
So I think quickly to the question on defense, that's another government agency, and other government agencies, they're doing a lot of collaborations. We want to understand how we work with them. Our office has done an interagency quantum sensing study to look at how Space Force, National Reconnaissance Office, and NASA are looking at investing in quantum sensing. So in different technology areas, a lot of conversations about how we can leverage each other's investments. So that's very interesting. The question here, in terms of Artemis, I would say look to the Moon to Mars architecture definition document process. We put that out publicly. And I must say, internally, we pay attention to the comments. I don't know what it appears like out there. It's a website and an email address and workshops, but we pay attention to that. And that's pretty important. So be involved in that process. We recently unveiled the technology shortfalls, really for our United States audience, but it also should give you a sense of the things we're thinking about of technology challenges. So I give the agency and NASA praise for being so open on the architecture definition and the technology shortfalls. And then finally, I would like to say, as the administrator says, with CASA now being formed and moving out, it's a new space sailor that's taking the Korean industry and government with it. It's a pretty exciting time. There's always these challenges in space with organizations, technology investments. That's part of the reason we're here. That's part of we need smart people and smart companies to help us think through these challenges. And it's an exciting time. These are the kinds of challenges we should have in the 21st century, and we're having. But I think we're going to go sailing the cosmos together, and it's a pretty exciting time. I'm pretty excited.
오늘 여러분들 어떠셨어요?
So how was our discussion?
괜찮았어요?
Was it okay? Was it good?
이럴 때 엄지척 한번 해주셔야 되는데요.
Why don't you give me the thumbs up?
근데 이제 우리 우주 항공이니까 우리는 이제
But because we are in the
우주로,
space
미래로,
exploration
자,
field,
하면서
so maybe we can
맞춰볼까요,
call
여러분들?
chant to the sky, to the
하늘로,
space, to the sky,
우주로,
to the space,
미래로,
to the future.
서경 우주 포럼 2024에 오신
So
여러분들
this will
모두
conclude
감사합니다.
the Seoul Economic Daily Aerospace Forum 2024, and I would like to thank you very much for your time and attention.